Okay. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you realize when you go to school, a little bit further to grad school at least, you start to realize how many degrees are newer or more recent. Like I have an MFA, and that's a thing that's only of the last 50 years.
Right.
And in sound, it's much newer, like I think 25 years old. It's not,
Okay.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like before that, people would only have mostly in music. They usually would have like a master's in music and kind of get into experimental stuff, start going down the sound path.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's
But
so cool.
we could start up now.
Sure, yeah.
Maybe tell everyone who you are, what you do, just to give some validation to what we're going to talk about.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. So I'm Dr. Shannon Switzer. I just have all my patients call me Shannon. I think you'll find that most music audiologists are pretty casual in that way. But I am the director of the Musicians Hearing Clinic at Sensaphonics, which is this kind of amazing hybrid company here in Chicago. It's half Musicians Hearing Clinic, half Pro Audio Lab right next door to the clinic. So my job is to see music industry folks Monday through Friday in the clinic to provide hearing healthcare appointments for them. But then I'm often out evenings, weekends around Chicagoland providing those services on site. So at music venues, hotel rooms, conferences, festivals, etc., and trying to bring hearing healthcare to the masses. Because as we know, music is not regulated as sound exposure. And I know we're going to do a deep dive on that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's my job. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I know how much you do because I see like your videos behind the scenes at stages. I know a lot of audiologists, especially if you work at Sensaphonics. You are a lot of big venues working with really amazing musicians from around the world. But you get a lot of cool backstage
Yeah.
viewing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a pretty niche gig for a healthcare worker, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good way to put it, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. I was talking to a patient the other day because we found out that, he's affiliated with NASCAR, and we were talking about the noise exposure from the road race that's been happening the last
Yeah.
couple of summers. And so we found out we had a mutual desire to bring hearing health to NASCAR. And so we traded info, even though he was just in the clinic for himself. But I said to him, networking and, that business side of thing is something that's really new to me because unless you're in private practice, if you're working at a hospital, you cruise through your patient schedule, and you're so busy that by the time of the end of the day, you can't even remember the patients that you saw, let alone have time to make those connections and see those faces again and again and start to explore ways to take care of their circles too. So that's been a really cool and unexpected part of working in the music industry, in addition to having the backstage passes.
Was that in your intention? Were you trying to get into a place like Sensaphonics? Were you more involved with musicians?
Yeah, so I've actually come full circle in that regard. I grew up playing clarinet all the way through undergrad, and that was my passion. So when I got time to decide what to do with my life, going pro sounded scary to me. I wanted to do something where, if I went to, blank college to get blank degree, I could be a blankagist and have that sort of security. And so
What part of the country where were you located?
Vermont, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm a native Vermonter from Rutland, and then I went to the University of Vermont for undergrad up in Burlington.
Okay.
And so I entered on a speech pathology degree because I'm not really good at blood and guts, and that continues to be the case. So I wanted to do something that could help people but wasn't too medical. And so I thought that was interesting. I thought speech and language development was interesting, but part of that coursework was Audiology 101, because if a child has a hearing impairment, it can impact their speech language development. So my first week, this was fall of my junior year, I took Audiology 101, and the professor, Dr. Liz Adams, who ended up becoming an incredible mentor to me, she took us through the anatomy and physiology of how sound makes it from the air to your brain. because I had a music background, learning how the ear works just absolutely blew my mind.
It's magical, isn't it?
It's incredible.
It makes everything else look boring. Like,
Exactly.
it is like magic. I tell my students that, like, at a certain point, it just starts to get magical.
Yes.
You know?
Absolutely. And I kind of had that lightning bolt moment where I was so just enthralled by it. I just felt fired up and I thought, I have to tell everyone about this.
Super nerd.
I need everyone to know how the ear works.
And how many people actually want to know how the ear works?
Doesn't everyone? I'm under the impression that every single person on planet Earth is very eager to know more about their
I've been
ears.
learning the hard way. It's a small percentage of people.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, people are fast, like, oh, that's cool. I didn't know, and it kind of just fizzles after that. I don't know, but you talk more intimately, so you might know more.
Oh, and I also have terrible confirmation bias, right? Because by the time someone comes to see me at Sensaphonics, they're ready. They're ready to take care of their ears. But that being said, I do feel like the tides are turning. I feel the general population is more interested
That's good.
in hearing health than ever before. Yeah.
It could be the internet. There's probably a lot of videos there's always like health related videos going around younger circles.
Yeah.
You know, TikTok, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And as an aside, I've actually been TikTok free since January 19th.
You're like, why'd you say it out loud?
No, it's all good. I went through the grieving process of the app disappearing.
Wait, you really did?
Yeah, and I don't create anything. Like one of my goals is that's why part of the reason I'm here with you, Ben, is I need to be more out in the world talking about hearing health and getting this messaging out. And part of that's going to be engaging with social media. So I was a lurker on TikTok. I never posted any videos. And then I spiritually accepted that it was going away. And then when it turns out it wasn't, I was already over it.
Oh,
So,
okay.
but now I'm thinking, should I make a Sensaphonics TikTok? And
Of course. I
think
can't believe
should.
there isn't one.
I know.
I have a lot of ideas for Sensaphonics, and I'm not officially a representative of them, but man, have I told so many people about Sensaphonic earplugs because they're the best ones I've ever used.
Yeah.
And I've been using them for 12 years, and they have definitely saved my hearing. I'm exposed to loud sounds more than most people with everything I do, and it's a game changer. It also makes the experience, especially like a concert, it's just a concert-goer or a music lover, just more enjoyable, where you can like still leave them in, go talk to the bartender or something.
Yes.
You don't have to take them out. You can hear the whole conversation, or just talking to friends, like trying to communicate something while it's loud. You don't have to take them in and out because you can hear everything, the whole frequency response. But yeah, I don't know. Just I'm a big fan of them. That's why I want to get that out of the way
Yeah.
first.
Oh,
And say,
thank
like,
you.
I use them. I annoy people with how much I tell them, like, go get them. It's worth the investment. It's worth the money. You'll have them forever if you're like an adult, give or take, right? How often should you get new ones? I've had mine for 12 years.
Yes, that's such a good question. So, the ear canal reaches adult size around 8 years old.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, it's pretty quick. But the ear changes throughout the lifespan. So as we age, the cartilage of your ear starts to lose elasticity, so it becomes more pliable. And so the plug will stay the same shape forever, but your own ears will slowly change. And we see that accelerate, I would say, in your 50s or your 60s. So if you're
okay.
under that threshold, the plug should last at least 5 years, is what I quote people. However, in practice, I see a huge variance. My last patient of the day today has had his Sensaphonics plugs for 22 years. And
They're still good?
and they still fit. In my experience, people tend to lose their plugs before they stop fitting.
Yes.
So, but to answer, in a bit more of an objective way, when you come into Sensaphonics, ideally for an annual hearing test. So the plugs are great, even if they feel good, even if they sound good, even if your ears feel amazing. Everyone should have an annual hearing test if you're regularly exposed to dangerous sound levels. And the reason for that is we can often detect change on the audiogram before it's even perceptible to you. And that's our chance to catch it and change behavior and safe listening strategies before we continue to see decline in hearing, especially seeing someone who's trained in in music audiology or music industry hearing conservation, because we're always looking for the earliest signs of change. I often see patients who have seen another audiologist for an audiogram, and the audiologist goes, "Yeah, everything's normal. You look so good. See you next time." And yeah, their hearing is technically within normal limits, but if you put on your hearing conservation lens, you can clearly see the beginnings of something called a noise notch. So sound injury on an audiogram happens around 3,000, 4,000, and 6,000 hertz, and we start to see this wearing away over time at those frequencies.
Can I pause you for a second?
Yes.
And can you explain to the listeners who don't know the average or the full hearing range of a human being and what that kind of means, the 3,000, 4,000, 6,000? They might not know.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So humans hear between 20 and 20,000 hertz. Most hearing tests are between 250 and 8,000 hertz because speech information, the fundamentals of speech, are all below that. But I always test all the way up to 18,000 hertz because there's a lot of wonderfully useful information in the extended high frequencies, because we can see change happen up there before we see it happen down below. And the reason for 3,000, 4,000, and 6,000 hertz, it was funny. I was actually going to ask you, do you want to take a stab at to why?
It might be because it's close to the resonant frequency of the ear canal, so it maybe produces a higher boost, a higher gain in volume because of that.
That's exactly right.
All right.
That's exactly right. You nailed it. I see you got the notes I sent you before the podcast.
No, I read enough about this. I try to be, I'm not an audiologist, but I try to get up to the important information I can give as a professor teaching audio. And then I always kind of stop there and say, now, from here, you should go talk to an audiologist. Like, I know enough to get them intrigued or at least listening to me.
Yeah.
And then pass them to an actual expert in that field.
Yeah, absolutely. And I usually don't put, patients on a, gosh, the phrase is slipping away from me. I don't put them on, I don't want to say blast. What is it called?
Put them on blast? Like call them out?
I don't want to put them on the spot. So I typically don't want to put patients on the spot like that, especially, when they're there to see me as their doctor. But I do it most of the time to my audio engineer patients, because there's such an incredible overlap between knowledge bases between audiologists and audio engineers when we're thinking about sound and hearing in music. And a lot of the times, even if it takes a couple of minutes, they can work it out and they get pretty darn close to it. And I've had a lot of audio engineers, young ones, say to me, "Oh, that must be why my mentor always tells me to take down 3,000 hertz when I'm mixing front of house." I'm like, yeah, there's a reason for that. It's the resonance of your ear canal. And so it's been kind of an interesting journey for me to learn how to speak your language as an engineer, so we can come to, more of a mutual understanding about what we're talking about. On the other hand, I also have found ways that we talk about the same concepts differently. And I have a moment when I'm with a patient and I'm realizing we're thinking about the same concept in two different ways. So frequency, for example, there's been times where I've seen engineers pointing at different frequency ranges, 3,000, 4,000, 6,000 hertz. And they're saying, oh, so, the mid frequencies. And then to audiologists, because the hearing test usually stops at 8,000 hertz, to them, those are high frequencies. So just the little nuances of that.
Yep. Same thing if you're talking with musicians as an audio engineer. There's certain things that have an overlap. Octave, for example, you say, I'm going to raise it an octave. They might think, I'm going to go up an octave. I'm like, no, I'm just talking about like an EQ filter. Octave, just doubling the number. Simple things like that.
Yeah.
That's why I always tell engineers or students of mine, like, try to learn a decent amount of music theory. You don't have to be proficient and expert, but it'll help you maybe communicate more. Maybe when you have a misunderstanding with what you're trying to say or articulate, you can understand the musician or your client's ideas better, and they can understand yours. And then same thing for musicians. I tell them all the time, like, try to learn a little bit about audio engineering and like what a microphone is, maybe how it works, maybe its polar response pattern, little details so you don't get annoyed or mad or have a misunderstanding with your engineer. I'm sure you hear both sides, knowing audiology, the music side and the audio production side of times where you have to kind of change your language or think differently about what you're saying, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. To make sure that the message is being understood both ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What are some of the advice you would give to musicians that are a little bit younger, at all ages actually, just musicians? What are some advice you would give if they don't have the means to get earplugs that cost, beyond, $10, $20, $30?
Yeah, absolutely. So my biggest advice would be, and I always sound like a broken record, a hearing test. We can talk about there are, dozens of different filtered universal fit earplugs under the price point of $40.
Right.
And I'll say hearing tracker at the start of every year, they release, the best earplugs of 2024, 2025. And what they actually do is they take measurements of the frequency response in a fake ear across all these different earplugs and sort of rate the frequency response. And so, yeah, I'll send it to you. But they have all these different categories, fit, sound quality, budget, all of that. So that's where I tend to direct patients for shopping for an affordable filtered earplug. The short of that is just say no to foam. There's a lot of really nice sounding, affordable hearing protection out there.
The orange or brown, they're all kind of colors, but orange is a very popular one.
Yeah.
Yeah, they kind of ruin the whole audio experience if you're at a concert.
Exactly. And what I find is that a lot of people are resistant to wear earplugs because they're concerned about the sound quality because their only experience has been with a foamy plug. And that's understandable. If that was the only plug I had tried, I would have the same reaction too. So if you haven't tried a filtered earplug, start there for sure. But some sort of annual hearing test. So I'm sure you've heard, but Apple has released through their health app a way to take a hearing test through AirPods right on your
Really?
phone. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
I'm excited about it.
Good.
And I'm sure if there are some audiologists who see this podcast, they're going to disagree with me, and that's okay. It's good to have.
Why do you think one would disagree with that? Just maybe because the AirPods can't reproduce the frequencies or do it the right way that you would in like a lab?
Well, the reason I think there's some hesitation is because what Apple has done, and first of all, I feel this is a sign that hearing health is an interest of the general public to the degree that Apple has gone ahead and done this. They've made a way for you to take a hearing test using your AirPods and your phone. They've made a way for you to use your AirPods, and this is AirPod Pro Gen 2. I believe that's the only model that this is available for. So you can take a hearing test through the AirPods. You can use the AirPods as active hearing protection on transparency mode. And then if you have hearing loss on the hearing test, the app basically EQs the frequency response to match up with your hearing. So it's like an over-the-counter hearing aid. It's actually it's FDA approved to wear as a hearing aid. And so
that's fascinating.
For mild to moderate hearing loss, as all over-the-counter hearing aids at this time are only cleared for mild to moderate hearing loss. But the concern is that, like we were sort of just talking about with earplugs, that some people might try using their AirPods as a over-the-counter hearing aid, have a negative experience with it, and then swear off hearing aids altogether.
Yeah,
even when
I
they
could see
could
that.
benefit from a prescription hearing aid. I think audiologists are also concerned that if patients are using over-the-counter hearing aids, AirPod or otherwise, that it's going to take business away from their practice. But the numbers that have come out, it's excluding the AirPods, but the numbers from the last couple of years for over-the-counter hearing aids has shown that it hasn't impacted people going to an audiologist for traditional prescription hearing aids. And the reason for that is because there's a huge swath of the population that's living with a mild hearing impairment and they're going without treatment. Because if you have trouble hearing in noisy situations once in a while, is it really worth laying down $6,000 to hear?
Right.
And for a lot of people, especially with inflation and everything, a lot of people are feeling no. They're feeling, it's okay if I miss 10% of the conversation, even though as your doctor, it's not. But I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
And so my answer to all of that is, as an audiologist, you should be the expert in hearing healthcare, and you should be willing to bring hearing healthcare to patients in whatever vehicle is accessible to them. So charging for your time, charging for your expertise. If someone wants to bring their AirPods into me and their phone, and I help walk them through that, and I bill for an hour of my time, that's absolutely fine with me. I don't think everyone needs a $6,000 pair of hearing aids. And I think audiologists have worked themselves into this corner where they only make money if they sell a pair of hearing aids, and they give away free hearing tests, but it's rolled into the price of the hearing aids. And so that's why people are hesitant. So the profession as a whole has actually slowly started moving to the other side, unbundling things, charging for your time as opposed to tying your worth into a product.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you said that the price of hearing tests, why they were free, or why they can be free, is because they just get it back on selling hearing aids?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you go into like a chain store where they're saying free hearing tests, you are paying for the hearing tests on the back end when you buy the hearing aid.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's why we don't do free hearing tests at Sensaphonics.
Okay.
You know, we always charge for our hearing test, our consultation, the ear mold impressions that we take for you to get your custom gear. Sometimes we're able to discount a product, but we never discount our services. And the reason for that is we need people to know our worth as
Yeah.
audiologists. Audiology as a profession is shockingly underpaid, considering it's a doctorate degree and the level of education and financial investment that you make to obtain that degree. The average audiologist is making a lot less than you might think. And so part of what we do at Sensaphonics, in addition to taking care of the music industry, is trying to elevate audiology too by educating audiologists in these special practices. There's no standardized curriculum in doctorate schools for music industry hearing conservation. It's not built in to any of the programs. I'm starting to see some programs talk about it here and there, but about 5% of a doctorate degree includes hearing conservation. The rest is diagnosis and treatment of hearing disorders.
Really?
Yeah.
I hear that a lot amongst different medical practices. Instead of prevention, it's how do we treat it.
Exactly.
It's the classic example is like seatbelts. Like they knew it was hurting people, but you made more money. So instead of they just weren't proactive. They just reacted to people being mad enough finally. And yeah, you get to a lot of medical field. It's kind of weird.
It is.
Sad. It's money.
It
It's a
no, it
business.
completely is.
Yeah.
It is a business. And, I'm stealing from Dr. Michael Santucci now, the president and founder of Sensaphonics. We don't have a healthcare system in America. We have a sick care system.
Yeah.
If we had a healthcare system, preventative medicine and healthcare would be covered. But it's not.
And it saves a lot of money.
It does.
You don't have to help people. It's actually when I don't go to the hospital for long bouts of my life or the doctor, I'm saving people. I'm saving money. I'm not doing anything.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just living life healthy and not causing any price when it comes to the medical industry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so,
And the prices aren't too bad. I mean, it's been a while since I went. When I went, I don't know if they still do it. The students at Columbia, it was like a free hearing exam, but I don't know if they still do that.
yeah, we still have a deal for the
Okay.
Columbia students.
Yeah, I figured. Yeah,
And I would like to extend that to SAE. I had a couple SAE students in the clinic last week. So,
I was there recently telling them about it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you may have been the one who nudged them towards me then.
I was on some panel and I was talking to the students and I told them to go check it. I'm like, it's right down the street, 660 North Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Get there. And that's the address of Sensaphonics for those who are like, don't give away someone's home address. I tell people all the time because it's a game changer. I mean, even we can talk about this too, we can get to it, but even if you are doing things around your house, construction, they're really great for that. the earplugs, especially if you're working with someone, you can still communicate for safety reasons,
Yeah.
and then still do something. If you have to bang a hammer inside of a closet, it's really loud. Those earplugs are helpful. Mowing your lawn, I mean, anything, even not music related, they're amazing for. So I'm always telling all types of people who are not even in music about it. But music lovers, concert goers, I tell them all the time, like, you have to. Concerts are all way too loud by anywhere between 10 to 50%,
Yeah.
depending on where you are.
Yes.
Why isn't there a law against it? There's laws against a lot of things, but not the decibel, SPL, of a music venue, indoors.
Yes.
Why?
This is such a good question, and it's something that this is an ongoing dialogue that we have. Why is the culture like this? Laura Sennett, Dr. Laura Sennett, who was the director of the Musicians Hearing Clinic before me, she's out in New York now. She actually just gave an incredible presentation on the loudness wars and the culture of loudness and how we ended up like this. The oversimplified answer is no one wants to listen to a chainsaw at 100 dB for a 2-hour set. Music is pleasurable. Music activates parts of your brain that are completely unique to the human experience, and it's a universal experience. We don't regulate music because it's fun and enjoyable, and we don't see it as a threat. Some other countries do, but in America, we don't. So we do highly regulate industrial sound exposure. If musicians worked in industrial settings, they would have to be provided with well-fitting hearing protection, and they would have to be provided with annual hearing tests. And oftentimes these settings contract audiologists to bring mobile equipment into the place of work to complete the hearing test to make it as accessible and easy as possible. Nothing like that exists for the music industry. And that's the whole reason Sensaphonics was created. I actually don't think I mentioned it to you. We're celebrating our 40th anniversary this year.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
That is amazing.
That's
Congratulations,
amazing. Thank you.
Sensaphonics.
Thank
40
you.
years. I've been going 12 years. Yeah, I heard about it when I was a student at Columbia, studies in hearing.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've been a guest speaker in one of those classes before.
Not yet.
Not yet. You should be.
We're in the talks. I've been talking to Steve Toddy about bringing that presentation in because I know Sensaphonics and Columbia have had a really long relationship together. I actually finally met Benj in person.
Oh, nice.
A few months ago.
He's really great.
He was in the Sensaphonics clinic just saying, hey, and I had heard so much about him, and he's just, a ray of sunshine. What a wonderful person. So we were both kind of actually geeking out about each other. I was like, Benj? And he was like, Shannon? It's like, I've been trying to meet you for so long. And he was like, I feel the same. It's like he was being overly modest. Benj is amazing. He's done amazing work.
I had him for a few classes when I was a student there. He doesn't work there anymore. I think he retired. Yeah. But so this woman, it was a doctor, an audiologist who wrote the book.
Oh, yeah. So
on why we don't have loud or rules or laws about it.
Yes. So she had done a presentation recently, and so I'm actually pretty fresh off of the National Hearing Conservation Association conference that was in Charleston last weekend.
Mouthful.
Isn't it?
So you were just
Jingleheimer Schmidt. So I was out there last weekend, and I presented on a panel with other music audiologists, and Benj was there. He did a presentation. I did a joint presentation with Dr. Santucci, and then Dr. Laura Sennett gave a presentation on the culture of loudness. And her summary was basically, we made it loud. We can unmake it loud. And how did we do that? And the answer is, have you heard of Hella?
The band?
No.
Oh.
There's a band called Hella.
Yeah.
I will check them out.
And it's a slogan. It's like hella cool, hella.
Exactly. So Hella is basically a training program, curriculum initiative to get audio engineers and music venues educated in delivering great sounding music in a healthy way to audiences. So it stands for Healthy Ears, Limited Annoyance. Hella. So you can get Hella certified after you take this curriculum, and it's launching on March 3rd, which is World Hearing Day.
Okay.
So it's global. We know that several music venues are going to adopt it in the UK, and I'm really going to try to lead the charge with Laura to bring it to music venues in the US, particularly in Chicago. So the curriculum was developed by a combination of audiologists and audio engineers, and it's nonprofit. So they're really trying to keep their costs as low as possible. And venues can self-select to get Hella certified as an indicator to their audiences that when you enjoy music in our space, we're going to try to bring some healthier habits to you, whether it's, mixing in different ways to make the music sound great, but get the loudness down, the levels down a little bit, educating about hearing protection for staff, having hearing protection in the venue, things like that. But it's, I don't know off the top of my head the pricing, but it's something really, really reasonable, like $25 to get certified.
okay.
And so, yeah, any profit that is made goes right back into the program to promote it. So that's something that I'm really excited about.
Are there also like formulas for how loud to be based on certain frequency ranges and duration, like things like that?
There may be. I haven't taken it yet, though.
Okay.
So I'm going to get Hella certified.
I wanna get Hella
ASAP.
certified.
Yeah, we all should get Hella certified.
Certified ASAP.
So yeah, I'm going to take the course myself, and then I'll have an inside scoop on the contents a bit more. But
Okay.
it's incredible. It's going to be incredible.
Yeah, it still blows my mind there's not a law for it. We have laws for everything and not for sound exposure. And when you asked me the rhetorical question of how do you like fix the loudness problem, I'd say 1 decibel at a time.
Yeah, I like that.
Just every day the venue just goes down 1 dB on average, and then after a couple weeks, it'll be like no one would ever know.
No, exactly. Because loudness,
It's all relative.
it is. Loudness is learned. It's completely learned. And that's
Yeah.
what I tell people when they start wearing the earplugs. I say, we know that this is a perfect fit. We know that we've got these lovely filters inside of them, and that's going to be as flat of a frequency response as you can hope for in an earplug. But your brain is picky. So you need to wear these plugs for a couple of weeks, go listen to concerts, play your instrument, and give your brain a chance to recalibrate to what we're doing here. And once people get over that initial hurdle, they can't believe that they ever listened without the plugs.
Yes, that's how I am. I sound so annoying when I don't have them, or when I'm trying to find them, I'll throw a hissy fit. Like, wait, I can't get out of the car. I need them. Like, I can't like open up the door to enter the venue. Like, I have to get them in. My ears have gone so used to it. Even loud music, I on average listen to music so much quieter now. Even in like leisure time when I would normally blast it for fun.
Yes.
I just can't stand loud stuff as much anymore.
Exactly. And I regularly have musicians in the clinic saying, I feel like I'm overly sensitive to sound. The loudness of my band doesn't bother anyone else. I'm the only one wearing earplugs. I feel like there's something wrong with me. And we do the whole workup, and it turns out they have pristine hearing and they're not sensitive to sound. They're having a normal reaction to how damn loud the sound is. And that it's their bandmates that, even if they haven't sustained hearing loss yet, they're desensitized to how loud it is.
And there's a lot of unfortunate negative thoughts about it when people say like, who cares about my hearing? Or like, I'm getting older, or like, that's for babies, or, there's so many things that you've heard your whole life. Like, earplugs are lame. I can't hear well with them. All these, these types of things. But, what do you, when you have a client that comes in like that, what do you tell them? Do you give them a rundown of how that's been like, they've been misled? Like, where do you start?
Yeah. Well, I actually, right when I started working at Sensaphonics, so I started working there full time in October of 2022. So I'm about 2.5 years into it. I was a student back in 2016, though, when I was at Northwestern. I had a clinical rotation at Sensaphonics, which is how the connection was made. And then they would always have me out once in a while to help with like Lollapalooza or NAMM show. And then when the position opened, I was ready for it. And so I was hired. But one of the first big assignments I had working at Sensaphonics, it was a huge name, a huge tour. I went out by myself. I was supposed to see the lead artists, and I ended up seeing him plus a dozen of his crew. And that's how that sort of tends to go. Even if you're going out to a venue for just one musician, once people realize an audiologist is on site and this is their chance, it ends up being, a dozen, which is good, which is great.
Yeah.
But the very last person that I had, they had me stay for the show, which was a lot of fun. And then after the show, as the monitor engineer was escorting me out, I ran into the front of house engineer mixing the show, and we were just chatting and explained what I do. And he wasn't wearing any earplugs. And I said, why not? Just out of curiosity. I genuinely want to know.
Mm-hmm. And
he said, I can't afford to have anything sound different. I need to know exactly what I'm listening to. And I said, yes, exactly. If you don't protect your ears, your hearing will change and it will sound different.
Mm-hmm.
So you can choose what different is going to sound like. You can choose if it sounds different with earplugs for a gig, or you can choose if it sounds different every moment for the rest of your life.
Right.
And so I think the reason people are hesitant to wear earplugs is they're just underinformed, and it's not their fault.
Mm-hmm.
It's the fault of this culture.
Yes.
There's such a huge gap in public education about hearing.
More than any other
general.
thing,
Yes.
any other sense. We talk about teeth, our eyes, our heart, our lungs, physical fitness, these things. But ears, I think it's because it's an invisible force. You
Yes.
can't touch it. It's not tangible. You could barely feel it except for when it's really low. So it's something that's just like invisible. It never shuts off, so we never get to miss it.
Yes.
It's always there. I don't feel my clothes on me right now. I'm not tasting something. I can close my eyes and not see something, but your ears, they are always going.
I completely agree. The hearing being invisible, the invisible sense, that's exactly what I say to people. If someone has a broken arm and they're wearing a cast, it's visible. We can sympathize over it. I sign it. It's a whole experience. But if you're sitting there with ringing in your ears, I have no idea unless you tell me.
You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so hearing is invisible, and it's something that we take for granted until something goes wrong with it.
Mm-hmm.
And from my experience, prevention is everything. There's
Yeah.
a lot we can do these days to help with things like tinnitus and other.
Is that officially how you say it?
Yes.
Let the world know. I was waiting. I was like, I hope she says it so I can be like, are we sure?
So I will never, ever, ever correct someone for saying tinnitus. The reason it's tinnitus, technically, is because itis implies inflammation, like arthritis, but that's not what tinnitus is. Tinnitus is neurological. As I slurred that word.
It's a hard word to say.
Yeah,
Tinnitus.
tinnitus is neurological.
Yeah. And not much of a way of treating it or healing it.
That's correct. So because we don't know exactly the mechanisms behind tinnitus, we have a lot of theories and we're getting closer and closer, but we still don't know exactly what's going on. So we can't treat it.
But you do know it's something within the inner
Yes.
hair cells.
Yes.
Okay.
So typically what tinnitus is your brain is recognizing that there's been a change at the level of your ear to those inner hair cells or outer hair cells and in the cochlea. So, and hair cells are sensory cells. I'm sure some of your audience knows that, but sometimes I think
they probably don't know
they might
anything
not.
we're talking about right now.
We should
The
post-
anatomy of the ear.
Yeah, we should post a link. I'll send you a YouTube video.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a 3-minute, the anatomy and physiology of the ear.
Okay.
So they can listen to this.
With
and
like an
then,
animation?
yes.
Great.
Come on down to Nerd Town with us. But the hair cells are basically sensory cells in your cochlea, which is your hearing organ. And they're responsible for essentially coding sound into electricity, because that's the language that your brain speaks. It sends the electricity up the auditory nerve to your brain, and your brain assigns meaning to all of this. So the ear...
That's where the magic is.
That's where the magic is. It's amazing. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So the ear talks to the brain, but your brain talks to the ear too.
Oh.
And so when there's a change to those hair cells in your ear, your brain can sense that and it starts getting overexcited and sending these extra signals down to your hearing cells. And what you hear is ringing or buzzing or hissing. I've had patients with cicada sounds in their ears. It's a
It's
little,
usually high pitch, high frequency.
it typically roughly correlates to the frequency of the hearing loss. Yes. So
Okay.
high frequency hearing loss is really common. Sound injury around 346K tends to be a higher pitched ringing. On the other hand, there are some disorders that really impact the low frequencies. And some people, when they have tinnitus, like Meniere's disease is a great example, which is a whole rabbit hole I'm not going to go down. I feel for my Meniere's patients, but they typically have a low frequency hearing loss. And so they hear this low roaring or humbling or rumbling instead. Yeah.
Ooh, that sounds spooky.
Yeah. But
Oh, that's terrible.
it is. But we're getting better at managing tinnitus, but prevention is always the better option. So,
Yeah.
and the severity of tinnitus is highly, highly individualized. It's actually your brain's and your nervous system's reaction to the initial onset of tinnitus that can play a big role in whether or not it's going to be bothersome to you. So that's why on our intake form at Sensaphonics, we ask about all these general health conditions because in addition to sound exposure, there's a lot that can change your hearing outside of sound exposure, like viruses and genetics, medications, blood supply to the ear is a big deal.
Drugs, food,
Absolutely.
exercise, just everything.
Exactly. So we ask about all these lifestyle factors, we ask about all these global health conditions, but then we also ask about depression and anxiety. And people are thinking, why would depression change my hearing? It doesn't. But if you have tinnitus, the chances that it's going to be bothersome to you are much higher because of what depression and anxiety mean regarding your nervous system. And when you think about it, it's kind of this race to the top, right? So if you have tinnitus and you're a musician, you're wondering what's going on with my ears, and then your nervous system gets dialed up, and then heart rate changes, blood flow changes, the cells in your ear change, and the tinnitus gets louder. And now the tinnitus is louder, and that's anxiety inducing. And so it goes up and up and up and up. And so we have to, this is a small subset of the population, right? So for a lot of people, once they have tinnitus, they get the hearing test, they see that their hearing's okay. They learn more about it. It's called demystifying tinnitus. Once people learn more about tinnitus and that it's not a threat, but it is a symptom to manage, then the nervous system relaxes and it gradually fades into the background over time. So for some people, it goes away. For a lot of people, it at least gets quiet enough that it's not pulling attention. But there is a part of the tinnitus population where it's bothersome. It's interfering with sleeping. It's interfering with concentration. And that's when we start using tinnitus management strategies. So it can be as simple as there's a lot of free apps for tinnitus management these days. I recommend Mind Ear to my patients. Which makes sense, right? Mind, ear. We've been talking about that connection.
Yeah.
It's basically a cognitive behavioral therapy assisted app that teaches you how to interact with your tinnitus in a different way. Sometimes I refer patients for straight up CBT with a professional because that helps them manage their reactions to the tinnitus. And then beyond that, there are all sorts of devices you can wear. There's something called bimodal stimulation is a treatment that's had some major success. So this is when we're pairing a second stimulus to tinnitus. So for example, there's something called linear, where there's a sensor that's placed on the tongue. There's headphones that go on the ear, and the patient listens to sounds from the headphones, and it's like 10 minutes a day for 12 weeks or something like that. And as the patient is listening to these sound patterns, the sensor on the tongue is doing these light kind of zaps along with it. So it's bimodal stimulation. And there's also a version of that where you're wearing a wristband that's vibrating with sounds from the environment. And so by pairing sound with the sense of touch, we're finding that we're breaking that circuit in the brain that's stuck on the tinnitus.
That's weird. That's
It's
fascinating.
wild.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah, it's pricey. You'll pay for it. So that's why, you know, again, I'm a broken record. If you can prevent tinnitus from happening, a nice pair of earplugs, that's an investment up front, is going to be so much cheaper than these management and treatment strategies on the
Right.
back end.
Right. Pay a few $100s up front if you can, or save up for it if you can.
Yeah.
And treat yourself. It is weird at first. I'll never forget my first day wearing them at band practice, right next to the drummer. And I remember him just hitting the hi-hat so hard, and it felt so muted and soft. Like the energy hitting me from the drum kit wasn't matching the volume I'm hearing it at, especially the kick drum and stuff, you know? It was so strange. And then it didn't take long, a couple hours.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I was like, this is kind of nice. And then after a couple months of using it, I realized I can't handle loud stuff anymore. And now I can't do it at all. But you get used to it. You learn what it sounds like to just wear the earplugs.
Exactly.
It starts to make sense. It doesn't feel strange anymore.
Exactly.
And they're I don't know, they kind of look kind of cool, so they don't make you look odd or anything.
Yeah.
People are always like, "What are you doing? What are those things?" You know.
Yeah. You're like, oh, just my favorite accessory.
And the interchangeable filters is amazing for different, situations. I like the negative 15s.
Yeah, 15s is what I put most patients in these days. One thing that I think people should know is what makes sound potentially dangerous is the trade-off between decibel level versus listening time.
Yeah.
So that's why we have a few different options to select when we're prescribing hearing protection. So gone are the days of just putting everyone in max attenuation. Once you're down in a certain level, more reduction doesn't make you safer for that exposure. It just takes away more music. So we try to strike the balance between keeping you safe while still giving you as much access to sound as possible. So 15 dB is great for most concert goers, most performing musicians. 25s, I'll put, my pit photographers in
Yes.
25s.
I was just going to say, people up front, security,
Yeah.
pit. If you're a front row concert goer, like avid concert goer, yeah, get 25s.
Yeah, if you're going to be on the rail for a festival,
Yes.
3 days, put those 25s
I used to do that
in.
a lot with no earplugs.
Yeah.
When I was young.
Oh, I've been so enjoying the back for the last couple of years.
The back of the concert?
back,
the stage?
yeah.
Oh, way in the back.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I'm usually at. By the sound person in the back. Kind of
Exactly.
in the middle.
I know.
It's the best place for movies, for everything.
Of course. Of course it is. I know. When people are like, where's the best place to stand in the audience? Next to the sound booth.
Yes, like 2/3 back, dead center.
Yes, absolutely. Maybe you should edit that out so people don't crowd the sound booth now. I want my
They're
I
not
want
going
my
to do it
spot.
because
Yeah.
their selfish need to be close will trump their logic and rationality.
Exactly.
It takes a lot of being you also need to be like a music nerd and like an audio like mixing nerd to be there too, because especially if you're seeing a band that might have a lot of like stereo stuff, stereo synth, it's a sweet spot to be. And then you also get up faster too. You don't have to deal with the crowd.
Exactly. And you don't have to go to oh my gosh. I'm so excited thinking about the sound booth. You don't have to go to coat check because you say hello to the front of house engineer. You go, oh my gosh, I heard this venue's hard to mix in, but you're going to kill it. And then they let you put the coat right on the railing of the sound booth.
This sounds like a lady's perspective.
Again, confirmation bias. Yeah.
If I did it, they'd be like, bro, if it was a guy, he'd be like, what are you doing? If it's a girl, he'd be like, don't hit on me right now. Like, it doesn't work out the same way when you have a beard, unfortunately. But that's a good point. Yeah, put it there. Or you end up just knowing the people. You probably end up knowing a lot of the people now.
I do. Yeah. It's been so lovely to just be able to walk into a music venue and see the Sensaphonics earplugs and all of the staff and waving and just having those repeat encounters. Like I said, it's like I said, earlier in the podcast, before I was in the music industry as a healthcare provider, I could barely keep track of the patients that I was seeing, especially as an audiologist, right?
Where were you before that?
I've worked in a VA hospital. I've worked in a outpatient clinic at a hospital, also pumping audios a couple of days a week for ENT, which is very high intensity, fast-paced sort of work where you are barely talking to the patient at all. You're just cranking out the hearing test and handing them back over to ENT. And then I've also worked at a traditional private practice where I was primarily fitting hearing aids. But the audiology as a whole, you don't have a lot of repeat patient encounters if you're doing your job right.
Yeah.
If you have someone coming back to the clinic every 4 to 6 weeks all year long, how are you fitting their hearing aids? What's going on
Yeah,
that
that's
they're in
not
this
good.
clinic? Whereas working in the music industry, I have loved seeing my patients out in the music world of Chicago, whether I'm out there working or just out there enjoying the show. It's such a nice, it's just been such a rich experience and intermingling of my professional and personal lives. I just feel like it's a treat. It's a treat to do this sort
It's
of
a
work.
cool job.
Yeah.
It's a cool job. One of the few ones where, yeah, you get to be a doctor and work in a medical practice and then do all this music stuff, the events, the cool, like NAM and different,
Yeah.
I'm drawing a blank on what they're called. You go to them, big events.
Festivals,
Not festivals, like NAM.
NAM trade shows,
Kind of like trade shows.
conferences.
Conventions,
Yeah.
conferences, more looking for convention. Yeah, you get to go to a lot of those and see a lot of really interesting people. And how do you handle and work with like construction workers? How do you ever have construction workers come in? How come there's not a lot of information being put into that world? Because if anyone's going to have hearing damage,
Yeah.
it's that world.
And the answer is they are protected by laws. They're protected by hearing conservation laws.
I guess maybe because the ones I'm thinking of, they never wear earplugs. Do you know what I mean? Like, so maybe it's just their foreman, their manager isn't being strict.
Yeah. They're supposed to be wearing earplugs. Or perhaps the job that they're doing is so brief that they haven't crossed that threshold where they need to be putting on hearing protection or something like that. But all industrial sound exposure is regulated by OSHA across the board. Whether you're, signaling on an airport tarmac,
Yeah.
construction site, factory. One population that I've had come through that are non-musicians that I've really enjoyed is a lot of staff at breweries around Chicago have come through.
That's a good point.
Yes,
Yeah.
because
Coffee grinders are loud.
I know
all day.
exactly. Yeah, and beer breweries as well.
Yeah,
So
that's a good point. I
It's
didn't
been
think of that.
Yeah. So
And just loud environments, the
Yeah.
rough surfaces, people, not rough, like flat surfaces, so people like echoing all day, the customers, machines.
but
Yeah.
still needing to hear clearly.
Yeah.
And so that's also the unique challenge of music listening is that you need to be able to interact with the sound while keeping your ears safe. These other, industrial exposures, you want them to be safe at work, of course, but for a lot of them, they don't need to be communicating or not communicating, but interacting with their sound in such a precise and dynamic way. The goal of those settings is to just block out sound. That's not what we're doing with music.
Right. Yeah, I just, for those construction workers listening, please wear your earbuds.
Yes. Yes.
Most of my uncles were in construction their whole life, and they all have severe hearing damage. Pretty sad. And it's something else I wanted to ask you about. Another reason why people should protect their hearing is it's this social and psychological thing that I've noticed where you can kind of get detached if you can't hear your loved ones and
Yes.
your friends, your family, your children, your grandchildren, and it could get kind of depressing.
Absolutely. Johns Hopkins University over the last 12 or 13 years has actually been doing a series of fMRI studies of how the brain changes when you live with untreated hearing loss. So untreated hearing loss is you have hearing loss and you're not wearing hearing aids, essentially. So they've been comparing brains with untreated hearing loss versus brains with normal hearing versus brains with hearing loss, but they're treating it with hearing aids. And largely what these studies are finding is that untreated hearing loss increases your risk of cognitive decline throughout the lifespan, but those who treat their hearing loss stay age matched to their normal hearing peers because of how important sound is for your brain. So you're absolutely right. And this is one of those things, this is one of those examples of what we see in the clinic, when we see the same pattern through patients again and again and again, we suspect that this is the case, but we're waiting for science to catch up. And this is a great example of science catching up and saying, yes, depriving the brain of hearing is a big problem. And so part of it is because sound is not stimulating the brain, and it's use it or lose it, like anything.
Oh, okay.
So there are some studies that show that when the auditory cortex is not stimulated properly, other areas of the brain start trying to overtake that as a resource. They go, we're not listening anymore. We don't need to use this. Let's be efficient and use it for something else. So that's part of it. And then part of it is these secondary causes. Like you said, if you can't hear and you can't participate in your social life, you start to withdraw. And we know that social interaction is so important for healthy brain aging too. So it's, there's multiple reasons why it increases your risk for cognitive decline.
Yeah.
And if you want to read something about the brain and hearing,
Sure. Yeah.
Of Sound Mind is a book by Dr. Nina Kraus, who is one of my professors at Northwestern. It's an incredible read. She's a brilliant person. So if anyone's listening and they're feeling fired up about hearing health from this conversation, the next stop would be to go on YouTube and listen to Nina Kraus talk. And so she's a neurobiologist, and she's dedicated her life to researching the brain and hearing.
Yeah.
It's absolutely incredible, and she has a special interest in musicians' brains and hearing. So this first book of Sound Mind is all about the general population of brain and hearing, but she was actually just at Sensaphonics a couple months ago to get her new plugs.
Amazing.
She's been with us for a long time, but she's due for a new set. And so she...
Doctor, you came out. She's due for a new set.
Yeah. It's so funny because this is an aside. I think I'm like a really calm, cool, and collected person. And then sometimes I see videos of myself and I just look really intense when I'm talking about hearing health. I'm so serious about the need for people to understand what's so magical about your hearing, but also what's at stake if you lose it.
I know. I'm so glad I learned a lot of this stuff when I was younger, right before I started doing this festival and everything a lot, when the loudness really came through. And I realized how important it is. And I thought, if I want to do this for my career, be a musician, be an engineer, teach this stuff, put on events, and then enjoy it. Above all, enjoy it still. I need to protect my hearing. And I went really extreme into it. I'm glad, because of the life I live. And I've been able to convince a lot of other people, or at least shed some light onto it. But I think that the best way to do it would be, you have to make it cool. It has to permeate pop culture somehow more, in a way other things do.
Well, have you seen Sound of Metal?
Oh, I was going to ask you about that. Literally, you took it from me. Of course, it was such a good movie. Very sad.
Yeah.
But beautiful movie.
Yeah.
That's so funny. I was going to ask you about that.
That was my pick for the Oscars that year.
Same. Only people like us would pick that.
Yeah, of course. But, I feel, talking about pop culture, I feel like hearing loss has been kind of like a sexy pop culture topic the last few years in terms of films. So we have A Quiet Place, right? And if you haven't seen A Quiet Place and you plan on it, I'm about to do a big spoiler.
It came out 8 years ago. If you haven't seen it, that's on you.
Why haven't you seen it?
Yeah.
Right. So the whole premise is that, you have this child wearing a cochlear implant, and at the end, this is such an aside rant, and you can edit this out if you want to.
I'm not going to edit anything out.
So the whole thing at the end is she takes off the cochlear implant, and it's feeding back, and because that sound is so loud, it blows up the monster. I saw it once. I don't know if it blows up, but the monster dies. My beef with this is that cochlear implants don't make feedback. Hearing aids create feedback because of the mic and the speaker.
Sure.
there's no speaker on the processor of a cochlear implant. The sound goes into your head.
You tell them. You
I
should
will.
be the technical director for sound for Hollywood Motion Pictures.
No, I have a bone to pick with John Krasinski because he went so deep.
He did.
And so thoughtful about every other element of this film,
Mm-hmm.
putting the sand down on the pathway so the leaves don't crunch while
Mm-hmm.
they walk. You know, Emily Blunt gives birth in a bathtub without making any sound for the sake of her family, okay? And we couldn't pay an audiologist $100 for an hour of their
You
time,
mean you. They should.
me specifically, to ask, is this how a cochlear implant works?
Yeah.
That's
Or just Google. They probably could have Googled it. Would this cost? Maybe not. You probably wouldn't have gotten a good answer, actually.
I mean, Google Scholar has everything.
Yeah, maybe they would have gotten
They
a good
could have
answer.
learned. They could have learned.
I
You
hate when
too.
movies do that, though. I
Yeah.
agree with you. When they go 98% the way there,
Yes.
and then they like just get it wrong on a couple things, you're like, why?
And I had to be that person. I'm usually really open-minded with film, but I remember just sitting in the back of the audience, and I think my jaw just dropped. I was like, no. And everyone else is cheering, and I'm just like horrified. That was the scariest part of that film for me. It was horrible.
This clip's gonna go viral. Audiologist gives her 2 cents on a Quiet Place. Needs to speak to John Krasinski.
Yeah, John
ASAP.
Krasinski at ears.by.shannon. We can talk about it.
You know why? Because that wouldn't have been fun. That's not as sexy.
No,
the
it's
fact
not.
that you can take that off and go "Ew," and make that sound.
That's exactly, yes. To go back to the original point, I have seen, I feel like hearing loss and cochlear implants has been pretty sexy in film and culture the last few years, but hearing aids have a little bit of catching up to do. We haven't sexified
Hearing aids are not as
aids.
sexy as cochlear implants.
They're really not.
According to whom are these things even sexy at all?
I know, right? Although I didn't watch it, but I guess like a huge thing on, or at least in the audiology forums, like the Golden Bachelor was wearing hearing aids, and so maybe I
Who's
don't
the
know.
Golden Bachelor?
I don't know. I could not name a single name from that show.
The
But
Bachelor, the
It's
show.
it's the Bachelor, but it's for seasoned humans in their
Okay.
50s and 60s and
Golden.
70s. Golden. Like your golden,
Golden
years.
Oh, so it's an elderly person.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so they have here.
So he's wearing it.
Makes sense. Oh,
Yeah, so-
Lord. Okay.
so,
I'm
like-
getting it now.
Yeah. So
Oh.
wait, I have an idea. Should we watch The Golden Bachelor and just do a whole podcast dedicated to analyzing The Golden Bachelor
Right now or in the future?
in the future?
Sure. Yeah, we could do that.
Once this goes viral, we can do that.
Yeah.
And then that will go viral. And we'll find a way to weave audiology and audio engineering into it.
Okay.
Yeah.
We probably would do good watching movies and breaking down what they're getting wrong about the sound.
Yes.
Because I'm really good at doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And I watch people do it. Like I watch visual effects artists do it with VR.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh, I could do what they do. I could just do it sound. Like
Yeah.
I could always do it sound.
Yeah. That reminds me of, is it called Foley? When they go
Foley. Yeah.
yes.
Like a Foley
Tinnitus,
artist.
tinnitus.
Yeah, exactly. Timbre.
Yeah, exactly. So, when I found out a few years ago, or I saw a video of a Foley artist doing her thing online, and I actually thought to myself, if audiology doesn't work out, I would like to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, just sound continues to be so interesting to me. I think it's so magical.
Were you always interested in it when you were younger?
Just music. Just
So it was
mu-
clarinet
yeah.
you grew up doing. Any other instruments or just clarinet?
I did play tenor sax, so I could be in jazz band, but I'm really not good at improving, and that's okay. But I really like, a good Mozart concerto on clarinet. There's something about classical music patterns that just really clicks for me. So I don't play as much as I would like to. I played a few cycles in Lakeside Pride up in DePaul. So the Lakeside Pride Symphonic Band.
Okay.
Lakeside Pride itself has all these different orchestras and bands underneath of its umbrella. It's a nonprofit. It's absolutely incredible. If anyone is out there looking to play their horn again, that is an incredible place to do it because you play at a pretty good level. So, but I haven't been able to participate for the last couple of cycles because they rehearse on Sundays and you get 3 skips. And before the season even starts, I know I'm going to blow right through them with my work travel and then my fun travel as well. So one day, though, I would like to play again. But that's my long way of saying music has just been a huge, huge part of my life, always.
What was the first concert that you went to?
My first concert that I ever went to was at the Vermont State Fair,
Classy.
Rutland, Vermont. We had front row tickets for Charlie Daniels, and that was a big deal to me at the time.
I was like, do I know who that is? Charlie Daniels?
He plays The Devil Went Down to Georgia.
Oh, okay.
And his whole thing is like,
That must
he's
have been
passed away, but the whole thing is, he plays his fiddle so hard that you see the hairs from the bow flying off of it. Like, he goes through a few in a show.
So you saw him front row, Vermont State Fair.
At the Vermont State Fair, right on the fairgrounds, which is the same grounds where they do the demolition derby too. So
Wow. How rural was this?
Well, Rutland has, I think, 15,000 people.
Okay. That's where you're from?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's the third largest city in Vermont
Okay.
with 15,000 people. Burlington, by far, is the biggest city in Vermont with about 42,000 people. But that's with school in session with UVM, which has a student body of about 12,000.
I was going to say, I drove through New Hampshire and Vermont, stayed the night in Lebanon, New Hampshire.
Yeah.
But near Dartmouth, I think. And I didn't. The fact that it doesn't have a highway that goes across it, just north and south, it doesn't have an interstate.
That's exactly.
Says a lot about the state and how rural it is.
That's
always
exactly
a good
right.
sign.
Yeah, Route 7 to go north and south, Route 4 to go east and west. What more do you
Not much
need?
going on up there.
Yeah.
It's beautiful though. I loved it.
Yeah.
I went to this mountain range. It's like the highest winds. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's known for having like really, really high winds, and they close it after October because the winds up there get like 200 miles an hour.
Smuggler's Notch.
Probably. This was 10 years ago.
Well, they also close up Smuggler's Notch, which is near Stowe, which attracts a lot of leaf peepers.
Leaf peepers?
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes. So leaf peepers is what you call someone who's come to Vermont to go look at the leaves. Tourists.
Oh, okay.
A lesser nice term is Flatlander.
Flatlander. Why Flatlander?
Because
They're
Vermont has mountains. Yeah.
Oh
They're not from the mountains.
Okay. That's funny. I like it. I like New England. I like Vermont. It's beautiful.
It's just really special. It's a really special place. So I've been in Chicago. This past fall, I hit my 10-year anniversary in Chicago.
Wow. And you came here for college, for Northwestern grad school?
Yep. So that was hard. That was a hard choice for me to make. Deciding to do audiology was easy. Knowing that it would take me out of Vermont was hard because there's no doctorate program for audiology in Vermont. And that's where
you didn't want to go to like New York? I'm sure they have something in New York.
New York.
It's closer.
Yeah, but New York is big. New York is huge.
New York is huge.
So going from 15,000 people to
Chicago's
3 million
huge.
in Chicago was a big
already
change.
huge.
Yeah. And we had, growing up, we would visit New York a couple times a year for a few days, and I always loved visiting, but after a couple of days I was ready to go because I just felt so claustrophobic because you can't see the sky. It's skyscrapers.
It's a whole nother way of living.
It is. And so when I got accepted to Northwestern, I didn't have the money to come visit. So while I was on the phone, and these audiology programs are really small, I think there was 15 people in my class, and I was on the phone with admissions as she was, walking through the different aspects of the program, and I Googled Northwestern campus, and this big photo of Northwestern on Lake Michigan with the Chicago skyline came up in the background. I thought, yeah, I think I can do that. I think I can do that.
It's a school that you can be sold on it easily.
Yes.
I mean, it's a great school to begin with, and then its location's amazing.
Yeah.
Chicago's a great city. The music and art here, the live sound, the colleges for the arts. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's a vibrant, exciting, humble city, though. I have talked with people, what makes Chicago different than New York and LA, and real people live here. No one's trying to be an influencer in Chicago. I don't think anyone is performing when they're out in Chicago, performing Chicago life. They're just living it. And I find that really lovely and authentic. And I feel like when I visit New York and LA, I feel like I wouldn't fit in because I wouldn't know how to act accordingly.
Yeah.
And here I'm just myself. And so what brought me from Vermont to Northwestern was Northwestern's program was just incredible. The program itself and the curriculum was outstanding, but they also have an accelerated doctorate program, and I'm a crazy person. So typically the doctorate is 4 years. It's 3 years of class and clinical rotations and a research project, and then your 4th year is a full-time residency called externship. Northwestern does it in 3. So the 3 years of class and clinical rotations are packed into 2 and the research project. And then you have your 1-year
That
residency.
sounds hard. Was it
It
all
was-
year round program?
Yes. Yeah. So
that
it was
sounds really hard.
it was really rigorous. It was really rigorous. It was worth it. But that's how I found out about Sensaphonics. So
You didn't even know about it.
no.
Wow.
Yeah. So I chose Northwestern because of the quality of the program, because it was accelerated, and I was so eager to just get done with the degree so I could start helping patients and get into the clinic and make a difference. So that's why I chose that program. But then during my 2nd year, I had a rotation at Sensaphonics. And during my 1st year, I had heard from the 2nd years about Sensaphonics because a couple of them had the rotations. And I could not believe that there was a hearing clinic dedicated to musicians right here in Chicago. And so I remember I went to my academic advisor and I begged for a rotation. And I said, I will do anything. I'll do anything to have a quarter at Sensaphonics. If I have to drive to Wisconsin for the rest of the year for my clinicals, I will. I'm ready. And they didn't make me drive to Wisconsin, but they did place me at Sensaphonics. And that's how I met Dr. Santucci and
Was Heather there at the
Dr.
time?
Heather Maliak.
Yeah.
Heather was my preceptor at the time.
She's great.
She's incredible. She was also just at the National
Oh,
Hearing
nice.
Conservation
Of course she
Association
was.
conference.
That's
so
good.
she was there. She did an incredible case study on diplocusis, which is another music-induced hearing disorder about pitch perception issues as a
Ooh.
result of sound injury. Yeah, it's super fun. And by fun, I mean
I
terrifying.
was going to
Yeah.
say, you sound like an evil doc. It's so fun.
It's interesting. And it's something I would not wish on my worst enemy.
What's going on? Can you elaborate on that? Like, what's happening? How does that happen?
Yeah. So when the sensory cells in the ear are injured, we often think about hearing loss as the byproduct and tinnitus as the byproduct, which are very common. But then there are these other disorders that you can sustain. One is called diplocusis, which is altered pitch perception. So the way it manifests can vary person to person. Typically, one ear is hearing when there's one tone presented, the ear hears 2 different pitches. And as you might imagine, that's really problematic
Yeah.
for anyone in the industry. Or you might be hearing different pitches between 2 ears.
Oh.
Because the cochlea it's called tonotopic organization, where it's the hair cells are tuning different frequencies. They're coding different frequencies. And so if you unrolled the cochlea out into a straight line, you can think about it like the keys of a piano, where all these batches of sensory cells are dedicated to different pitches. So if we have injury to one batch of cells, not only does it impact that frequency, but it can impact the neighboring frequencies. So that's part of what's at work with diplocusis. And then of course, your brain has a lot to do with it as well. There's also something called dysacusis, which is sound distortion. So as sound is moving through the sensory cells, the injured cells are warping the sound quality, listening through a broken radio, basically. And then we have hyperacusis, which I would say in my clinical practice is the second most common after tinnitus. So if we take hearing loss to the side and we just talk about these other symptoms, for me, I mostly see tinnitus, and then I see a fair amount of hyperacusis as well. And
What's that one?
this is decreased sound tolerance. So sounds might feel physically painful to someone with hyperacusis, and we're not talking about loud sounds. We're talking about everyday sounds. So someone tapping their spoon on the rim of their coffee cup might feel physically painful to someone with hyperacusis. And so that's a tricky one to navigate too, because the world of music is pretty loud. And then sometimes what's interesting is that people with hyperacusis, because their ears feel sensitive to sound, they start overwearing their hearing protection. And I guess this is a warning message to patients. Wear hearing protection when it's loud and you're at risk for hearing injury. But you do not need to listen to this podcast and then say, I'm going to be so healthy with my ears, I'm going to wear earplugs all the time. Because I've had a couple of musicians report to me that they have been doing that, to the point where I now counsel almost every person to wear it when necessary, but expose yourself to normal levels of sound. Because sometimes with hyperacusis patients, because they aren't exposed to normal sound levels, they train themselves to be even more hypersensitive to sound. And then they're wearing the plugs full time. And then they're taking out the 15 dB filters and putting in the 25 dB filters instead.
It sounds like going down the path of someone who might, in their own way, have like a little bit of hypochondriac, like a background, maybe prone to anxiety. You know, just overdoing it.
Yes,
going too far.
overdoing it. Yeah. So, and then, the treatment for that is basically exposure therapy, forcing yourself to listen to these sounds in small increments and small duration, and telling your brain, this is okay, I'm safe. And your brain has to relearn how to interact with sound in that way. So these are called music-induced hearing disorders. And what's interesting is music-induced hearing disorders are ultimately what drive people to quit the industry. Because when it comes to hearing loss, I don't want anyone to have any hearing loss. But if you have a 40 dB noise notch, if you're playing your gig at 90, you don't even notice your noise notch. You'll notice if you can't listen to sound for more than 30 seconds without it feeling physically painful. So those music-induced hearing disorders are very difficult to treat. If you catch them while they're early, you have more success with managing them. And there's different strategies to do that. But once they are moderate to severe, it's really difficult to treat them. And so, broken record again, prevention, if we can, that's the silver lining for all of this. That's a silver lining for everything. I say to my patients, I'm not trying to fear factor you. I don't want you to leave this appointment paranoid about the sounds of the world ruining your ears. No. It's to educate you so you can be empowered to make healthy decisions consistently.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be all or none. I'm not perfect with my use of hearing protection. If I'm at a gig that I'm really excited about and my favorite song comes on, I'll take out the plugs if I want to.
When you know it's under 3 minutes at 101 decibels.
Have my NIOSH app out, making sure we're okay.
Yeah, right there. And I have an app here. I'm always doing it at parties and festivals, and people are just like, "What are you doing?"
Exactly.
Get data, man.
Yeah. Why not? But yeah, if I'm at a gig, I'll pull my plugs out and listen to a couple of songs without my earplugs in if I feel like it. But I'm at the point where, like you, I feel like the music sounds better with the plugs in.
It does sound better.
Because we're not oversaturating what the cells can naturally handle. And so the clarity is improved. And you were talking earlier about being able to, talk to your friends with the earplugs in. Sensaphonics actually fits most venue staff with plugs. I think I mentioned that earlier. Almost all the bartenders at almost all of the major music venues have Sensaphonics earplugs. And what I hear time and time again is not only are my ears not ringing and tired, I can hear better during my shift.
Yeah,
I can actually hear what the patron is trying to order. Because when you're in a loud place and maybe you've had a couple of drinks, you tend to scream your order at the bartender. Not me, but we've all seen that happen, right?
Yeah.
And maybe I've done it once. But you keep... But, right, and so
you can't help it.
You can't help it.
Yeah.
Because your references 100 dB. So you need to talk louder than that in order to be heard. And so these bartenders are just being screamed at. And so we cut it down 15 dB and their ears can actually process the
Yeah.
sound that's around them.
That's a rough job when it comes to sound exposure.
It is.
Bartender, especially ones like I was just at the Empty Bottle on Saturday with the bars directly lined up with the PA speaker.
Yep.
Not like at Shuba's where it's a separate room or Lincoln Hall, that's rough. Bars where you're in line with the speaker and the crowd. I mean, I don't know how they do it. Sometimes when I speak, I'm quiet. I'm like, they heard me. I'm like, how do they even hear me? I could barely hear myself speaking. I'm like, they must just get so used to it. I don't know. But yeah, any bartenders out there, get earplugs.
Yes.
Get some Sensaphonic earplugs.
We do. And we have a secret discount for venue workers.
Who are you looking at? That's good, though. I mean, they're exposed the most, and they might preach it the most, too, because they'll see the results. You can't deny these results. And then they might start telling other people in their industry about it. I don't know why you wouldn't,
Yeah. It's all word of mouth.
Yeah.
The whole industry is word of mouth.
Would you say that one of the biggest causes of hearing damage is just self-induced, just your decisions in life?
For the industry,
Or just for humans in general? Like hearing damage is mostly just you exposing yourself to things too much and your habits.
no, I wouldn't agree with that completely. I think there are certainly things that you can control. Out of everything that can change your hearing, sound exposure is by far the one that you can control to a high degree.
Oh, then that's what I was meaning.
Yes.
Like,
Oh, sorry. I
yeah.
misunderstood
No,
the
no,
question.
it's okay. That's what I was
Yeah.
meaning. Like, the things that what causes hearing damage is mostly your own doing, your own decisions. The things you put yourself in, the circumstances, the concerts, the loud music. If you decide not to do that, you will more likely not have hearing damage.
Not necessarily.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
so,
what I was trying to ask.
No, yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, things like high blood pressure increase your risk
Right.
for hearing loss.
But what if you can keep that down through healthy decisions in life, like stress, eating, exercise?
Of course.
Which is, again, your decision.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. But yeah, what I say is you can control sound to a high degree, and then the next best thing you can do for your ears is to exercise and have a healthy diet.
Right, okay.
Like everything, because if we can mitigate or even delay the onset of some of these global health conditions that we're talking about, that is good for your ears in the long run. Another reason to get an annual hearing test. I catch patients once in a while who come in for their annual 3K, 4K, 6K, stable. No signs of sound injury. But what is going on at 8K? What's going on at 9 through 12? There's been a bit of a change. And there's been a few cases where I've asked the patient, when's the last time you had your annual wellness check? And it's been a few years. And then they go see their primary care physician. It turns out their blood pressure is elevated. And we're seeing blood flow change the hearing. And these different diseases and disorders have different patterns on a hearing test. So based on the test results, your background, now I'm losing my voice. This is from
okay.
NAMM show still.
Talking a lot. Hooting and howling.
Screaming about the quiet place. I'm like, why do I always lose my voice? I'm very calm all the time.
Screaming about the quiet. You really didn't like that ending.
No, I'm going to go journal about it after this. But yeah, there's actually a lot we can tell about your general health on a hearing test, which is interesting. So it's good for your general health. We can tell sometimes markers about your general health on the hearing test before it shows up elsewhere.
Okay. So you would say it's good to get like a full physical or get your blood work and then bring it to an audiologist.
Or the opposite.
Or the opposite.
Yeah.
Audiologist first, then.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're not really interpreting blood work during the hearing health appointments, but if I see a decline in your high frequency hearing in both of your ears and there's no discernible cause for it and there's been a big decline in your hearing, I refer to primary care.
Okay.
I say you need to have a workup. We need to figure out what's going on and make sure that there's not something needing prompt attention that's causing this. When it comes to change in hearing, asymmetric change, one ear change is always a big red flag. There's a lot of musicians in the industry, though, do have asymmetric hearing from sound exposure, which is interesting. So
Violinist with the F hole right here. Drummer with the hi-hat to the left.
you got it, yeah.
Yeah.
Violinists, violists, drummers tend to see a lot of notches in the left ear.
And the stage monitors tend to be on the left side for drummers, yeah.
Absolutely. And on the Sensaphonics intake form, on the second page, we actually have a diagram of a stage in front of house, and we say, draw where you stand. So we can get an idea of what the sound exposure is like. And so if I do a hearing test and I see that one ear has a lot more loss than the other, most of the time, before I even ask the patient, hey, you've got more loss in your left ear. Do you want to tell me if that left ear has more sound exposure over the course of your life? I've already looked at the diagram and I go, oh yeah, they're standing next to the drums and they're just getting absolutely killed. That's why. But it's interesting because a lot of musicians can't even perceive that they have an asymmetric loss until it's very severe.
Yeah.
But again, we can catch it early and change up that behavior. And on the note of asymmetric hearing injury, one thing that I want to talk about is the use of in-ear monitors. So in-ear monitors are often marketed as hearing protection devices. They're not. Please be careful if you're shopping around for in-ear monitors. There's a lot of interesting and creative marketing strategies and
There
blurbs
always are.
on websites. There has to be, 18 drivers and an earpiece. What are we doing?
Does there have to be, though? Do we have to have marketing schemes to lie to people or, like, convince them that they should get something? And they do it a lot in the audio world for, like, how they sell microphones and speakers.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
They fudge numbers or they switch definitions around to make it feel more appealing, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. There have been circumstances, and I won't name names, but there's been
Oh,
circumstances.
come on. You need to go viral. Name
we'll
the
do
names.
it. Yeah. Fine, here they are.
You don't have
But there's been times where I've been, obviously I work at Sensaphonics. 99% of the in-ear monitors that I work with my musicians are Sensaphonics in-ear monitors. But sometimes I get someone in the clinic who's using a different company and they're trying to switch to Sensaphonics, or they just want a hearing test, and that's absolutely fine. If you're happy with another company's in-ears, you can still come see me for your hearing healthcare and get a hearing test, and I'll teach you how to stay safe with a competitor's ears. That's fine with me. And I thought of something else I'm going to talk about too. But for in-ear monitors, sometimes I read on websites the descriptions of the monitors and the new feature and how this new feature is going to save your hearing. And the truth is stretched really thinly to the point where there have been audiologists who specialize in working with musicians who have filed formal complaints with the FDA, and those companies have had to take that verbiage down because it's so misleading.
Yeah.
And so I'm
glad someone has said something.
absolutely, and I've got two bookmarked right now. If I can plow through my to-do list of 143 items, I will file that complaint with the FDA. But in the meantime, I'm on the DZ Records podcast. One day. Safe use of in-ear monitors. Be critical, a critical thinker when you're shopping around. Ask yourself, why might someone want to sell me 18 drivers in an in-ear? Is it for my health or is it for marketing? That's the easiest way. But there's a safe way and a dangerous way to use in-ear monitors regardless of what company you purchase them from. Number one is to turn your levels down. I know it sounds obvious. It's not. There was a study done by Fetterman at Vanderbilt in 2008 investigating preferred listening levels of 100 musicians between wedges and custom in-ear monitors. And the first part of the study was preferred levels. So dial the wedge to your liking, dial the ears to your liking. They found that 98 out of 100 musicians dialed the wedge and their custom in-ears within 1 dB of each other, which was shocking.
Uh-oh.
The hope of the study was that we would say, when you wear in-ear monitors, you listen 12 dB lower. That is not what we found. We found instead your auditory brain is extremely precise. It knows all the qualities of how it should be listening regarding pitch, timing, timbre, and loudness. And so part 2 of this study was investigating minimum acceptable listening levels. The musicians were forced to turn down the wedge in the in-ears, and they could only get the wedge down by a dB-ish before they said, I can't listen any lower, I can't hear. And the levels for the in-ears came down significantly. So that was the silver lining of that study. If we educate people to turn down their listening levels, they can, and their brain can learn. Just like you and I talked about the plugs earlier, it's the same concept. If you give your brain a chance to listen at lower levels, it will accept it and it will sound natural, and then that will be your new starting place for sound. But it has to be a conscious effort. And I'll say, same process for wearing an acrylic in-ear monitor versus wearing a silicone in-ear monitor. So Sensaphonics makes all of its gear out of soft silicone material. We have the patent on it. And other companies make their in-ears out of this hard acrylic plastic. And it's actually quite a bit more difficult to make a silicone in-ear monitor from a production standpoint. But we do it because with a soft earpiece, we can go really deep in your ear canal and have it stay comfortable. Because the outer 2/3 of your ear canal is skin on top of cartilage. The inner third is skin on top of bone. We've entered your skull. And when we get up to that boundary, it feels really, really sensitive. And with the silicone canal, we can go right up to that boundary and stay comfortable. And when musicians move their jaws around, it moves their ear canal. And so the soft silicone moves with the ear canal and keeps the seal. So a proper seal in max isolation is a broadband of 37 dB. Isolation closer to 45 in the highs, which is a huge amount of isolation from stage levels.
Yes, that's huge.
It's huge. So it gives musicians a greater chance that they're going to be able to actually turn down their levels and listen lower compared to an acrylic earpiece. So
And you said the goal is to get it negative 12 decibels?
no, I was just
Just throwing out a
just
number.
throwing it out there. Wouldn't it
Okay.
be wonderful if everyone listened at minus 12 dB?
I heard it was negative 6. Is there any truth to that? That on average you can get it about negative 6 quieter than the actual floor monitor?
That's what the Fetterman study said, but individual use varies
Right.
wildly. So a properly fitting earpiece. So after education, you need to educate musicians to turn down their levels. A properly fitting earpiece is essential to making that a reality because we need to increase isolation. And then number 3, to get levels down, would be measuring the levels. So Sensaphonics have you heard of it's called DB Check Pro? So a couple summers ago, we released an inline in-ear monitor sound level analyzer where musicians can plug their ears directly into the analyzer. They jump that into their pack. There's no change in sound quality. There's no latency. And it measures the output levels of the earphones in real time because we've taken all of the major manufacturers and programmed the DB check with their specs. So the musician selects their model, it calibrates the system, and they can see how loud that they're listening. And the tool has a little display screen that shows them how long they can listen safely according to both the OSHA and NIOSH standards. So it's an incredible tool.
Yeah.
There's no other way to know how loud you're listening to your in-ear monitors, which is insane. In-ear monitors have been on the scene for 40 years,
Yeah.
45 years.
Since the early 80s probably, right?
Mid-80s, yeah. This is the first time we've been able to actually measure them in a realistic way. Beforehand, what you would have to do is you would have to take a little probe tube microphone and feed it down the ear canal and then put the earphone on top and then have it hooked up to a computer like you would with a hearing aid verification. That's how we verify hearing aids. You could do the same with a musician, but it's just not practical to do that. And you have to have an audiologist on site to do that, with this, musicians and sound engineers can take the tool directly and measure these levels instantly and directly with a piece that's, 3 inches.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Sensaphonics has that?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's remarkable.
it is. And the hope is that one sound engineer or one band member will just make it part of their kit and just pass it around. Not every single person needs a DB check. If you get one for the band, you can all share it and everyone can measure their in-ear levels.
Yeah. The Grammys, instead of them doing all the wonderful things they do, they need to have a segment where they have this stuff broadcasted to
Yeah.
100 million people watching,
I would love that.
right?
Oh my gosh.
Why don't
Let's
they?
do it.
Instead of
Yeah.
the stupid stuff they show us, show something productive and actually beneficial to society.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, especially because MusiCares, the Recording Academy's charity, MusiCares, they contract audiologists like me to provide teleaudiology services to musicians around the country. So, one barrier of that, of course, is I can't reach through the computer screen and take a nice ear mold impression for you, but I can teach you more about your hearing. There are some screeners they can take and just talk about a lot of what we're talking about today, but closer to about 45 minutes or so. Although I could do 6-hour appointments, as you can tell from this podcast.
You get
I could
excited
fill
about
I could fill a 6-hour appointment for sure. But all that to say, MusiCares, connected to the Grammys, is interested in hearing health for musicians, and so that would be an incredible platform to.
It would be.
Yeah,
Let me call up the Grammys for you.
let's do it. Why not? We'll start with the Chicago chapter.
Yeah, there
Get
you
in
go.
there and then work our way up.
Yeah, if we can promote hearing wellness, conservation more, and then just, better pay for musicians, we'd have a big win.
Yeah, definitely.
If you can hear better and have a healthier life as far as your finances, it'd be great
Yeah.
with music.
I know. What we need to do is make sure Chapel Roan gets nominated again. So then when she wins again, she can get up and demand hearing healthcare services
Yeah.
for musicians.
Yeah, that was great that she did that. And I wish that the bigger artists said more stuff.
Yeah.
They need people, when you have that much power and money, you should really start talking.
I agree. And
What else are we doing?
Yeah. Healthcare shouldn't be political, right?
No, that's the thing. It's
Yeah.
not. If someone's like, we need hearing protection more in our venues, there should be rules. I mean, I want to go back to the volume in a venue. We have so many laws, and that one, it's just for like to argue that it's like it's like music is enjoyable, but this is still a health concern, a safety concern. It's like for the betterment of humanity to not have venues be so loud.
Absolutely.
And they have the technology. They could just turn it down a little bit, bring
Yeah.
the fader down, 6
Yeah.
decibels.
It's, a lot of the time it's management saying louder. Louder is better. We want people to have fun. We want people to spend money. Crank it up. Even if that's not what the audience wants, even if that's not what the sound engineer or the band wants. And I know, from chatting with my audio engineer patients, everyone handles that dilemma a little bit differently. I've heard of, changing one fader that doesn't actually do anything.
Oh, yeah. You get really good at a lot of fun psychological tricks as an engineer,
Yeah.
especially live sound. Like, yeah, I'll raise that, and you move something that doesn't, or you do, but you don't. You just like fake it, and it works almost 100% of the time. It's like, oh, okay, I
Yeah.
can hear better. It's like, I didn't
Yeah,
do anything.
the placebo effect is powerful. It's real. It's really real.
And therefore, you can turn things down because once it gets a couple decibels quieter and everyone gets used to it, that'll be the new norm,
Exactly.
Yeah. Have you, what do you tell musicians who have like a temporary threshold shift? Can you like talk about that, what that is?
Yeah. So a temporary threshold shift is something that I think all of us have experienced throughout our careers. It's when you have a loud sound exposure, you're playing a gig or you're at a show, you leave, your ears are ringing, and you have this really muffled underwater sensation. What has happened is that the hair cells, the sensory cells in your ear, have been overworked. and they're unable to process sound properly as it's coming through. So if we did a hearing test on you right then and there, if you had normal hearing before the show, you are probably showing a temporary hearing loss on the audiogram. But then you get some rest, you get away from the sound, you wake up the next day, your ears are feeling better. No ringing, no more muffled sensation. But what we know is that there's still these micro injuries happening to the cell. So even though your symptoms go away, injury is happening, damage is happening. And it's that repeated temporary threshold shift again and again and again that eventually turns into a permanent threshold shift. And that's when those cells are dead. You have over 200 different types of cells in your body. Your hearing cells are some of the only ones that don't regenerate when they're injured. They don't know how to.
What's up with that? Why those ones out of all of them?
I know. It's not fair.
It's not fair.
It's not fair.
It's evil. But
And
I guess it means it's sacred.
It is.
You know?
And a huge reason that sound injury is a problem in the first place is because for the vast scope of humanity, the world's been quiet.
This is what I tell my students all the time.
Exactly.
Everything's been quiet up until 150 years ago.
That's exactly what I say.
Yep.
These are pro audio tools to listen to a quiet world, to detect soft sounds from a far distance, like a twig snapping, to let us know there's a predator out there. And now we hear loud sounds up close for hours on end. Our ears, we've just not had enough time to evolve to keep up with it.
It happens so fast.
So
Cars,
fast, yep.
motorcycles, industry, trains, airplanes, and then, you throw music and concerts into it. That's something only of the last, 50, 60 years.
Yeah.
Like a live concert with a big PA system.
Yeah.
So that's so recent, and our ears are not meant for it. They don't know what to do with that.
Exactly.
It's why when you go to a peaceful, quiet place like Vermont,
Yeah.
it does feel good, and you can't always pinpoint why if you live in Chicago or New York or a loud area. And it's because you get to let your ears breathe.
You do.
You know?
And even in a city, if you're around safe sound levels, because hearing is your survival sense, your brain is processing everything. Even if you're not consciously paying attention to every single sound that happens, your brain is evaluating everything around you and trying to determine, is this a threat or is it okay? That your hearing is your only sense that continues to run while you sleep. That's why we wake up when the floor creaks in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Because it's your survival sense.
Do you think that's an argument that it might be like the first sense we developed? Like the oldest sense?
I don't know.
I don't know either. I always wondered that because it doesn't shut off. It's like the survival sense.
Yeah, I think it's probably the first sense. But now I'm going to go do some research. I want to know for sure.
You never thought it?
I'm sure they have, but I can't do it all, Ben.
That's what I think about. I'm like, it's got to be the first one. It doesn't shut off. It's meant to be heard. It transcends walls and light and visuals and smell.
Yep.
Smell can be covered by something else, and a wall can be here. But if something's loud enough, I'm going to hear it through the wall, regardless of anything else. If it's pitch black, I'm in a cave, and it's 50,000 years ago, I can hear everything.
Yeah.
Can't see it, might not smell it, can't taste it, can't touch it, but I could hear it. And I could tell by what it is by how it sounds.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Fast. Our ears are unbelievable.
They are. And I feel like we've all played that game in junior high that's like, oh, would you rather lose your vision or lose your hearing? And everyone choose hearing. They said, I can't imagine not being able to see. I wouldn't want to, but if we lost our vision today, we could still function in the world.
Yes.
Just fine.
Especially on a social level. It's quite important.
Yes.
A human social level hearing is, I say the same thing. My students, people will always be like, oh, visual. I'm like, you guys, you have no idea. I always say, watch a movie, listen to music or podcast or a TV show with the audio undone. And tell me how much you enjoy anything I just said.
Exactly.
And then do the opposite where you have the audio but no video, and it's just fine. That's why podcasts are popular. You don't have to watch them to enjoy it. Movies are amazing. An audiobook, a great example. You can paint a whole picture with just sound.
And just so much of, the small joys of life are from sound. When you're, I'm pretty sarcastic, which is crazy because I haven't been sarcastic at all for this entire podcast.
No,
but
I wouldn't get that, actually.
no, yeah, good. That's good. The small joys of life, someone making like a little comment under the table, an inside joke. You know, I don't have kids, but hearing your kids laugh, hearing your significant other, say I love you. These little moments that make up every day are so connected to sound. And it makes our life so vibrant in a way that I think we just don't realize until it's gone. Every fall, when I fit hearing aids, I love to fit hearing aids in the fall because when they come in for their 2-week follow-up, I fit them to their baseline. We get them all ready, and I say, go out and listen to the world, come back in 2 weeks, and we'll keep fine-tuning the hearing aids. But I need to figure out what's working and what's not. Every time I hear someone say, I can't believe the sound of the leaves on the ground. When they walk over the crunch that the leaf makes. One time I had a woman say, I watched a leaf fall off of the tree and float down and scrape the sidewalk, and I could hear it. Those little sounds of life that we all take for granted are what make life so wonderful.
Yeah. Not just from human speech, but music, the earth, nature.
Yeah, the sound of the world around us. It's incredible.
Yeah. I'm trying to think what time.
And
guess how long? Oh,
I'm good on time.
You're gonna have we can keep talking.
I'm happy to keep talking.
Fine.
Yeah.
Great. Cool.
As long as my voice doesn't give out, I'll just keep talking.
No, we're both getting a little scratchy. So what else is new? What's going on in life?
What is going on in life? Oh. Okay. My real life? Not my real life. This is my real life. You know what I mean. My non-audiology life. This is all just an act. No, sorry. Do you mean my non-audiology life or my audiology life?
We've been mostly focusing on professional life.
I mean, this is my life, isn't it?
It seems like it.
Yeah.
It's one of those jobs that is all-consuming.
I love what I do. I love it. It's amazing.
A lot of traveling.
A lot of traveling. Yeah, we went out to NAMM show. We went out to Charleston for the Hearing Conservation Conference. In March, one thing that I'm excited about, I can't remember if I mentioned it already, but on March 3rd, it's World Hearing Day. And so that's the next project that I have my eye on. It's World Hearing Day is a campaign by the World Health Organization to raise public awareness about your magical hearing system because there's such a deficit in public education about hearing. And so Sensaphonics has been a partner of the WHO for the last 10 years to lead the charge on hearing health and music specifically. And Dr. Santucci is one of the core members of the World Health Organization's Make Listening Safe initiative, which is designed to tackle how loud the world is and how recreational sound is hurting people and the long-term implications that's going to have on us as a society. So in 2015, this initiative was formed because the WHO projected that 1.1 billion people between the ages of 12 and 35 alone are at risk of sound-induced hearing loss from recreational exposure like music, concerts, earbuds, gaming, etc.
Oh, that's something we should talk about. Earbuds and gaming.
Yeah, absolutely. And so 1.1 billion people of that demographic is about 50% of that graphic. So 50% of young people are at risk of permanent injury.
Wow.
And so what are we going to do about it? And World Hearing Day is one of the major vehicles to get this messaging out. And so every World Hearing Day, Sensaphonics reaches out to a number of our artists and we give them a little press kit and they don't have to plug Sensaphonics. They just have to tag the WHO and hashtag World Hearing Day. And it's all volunteer. All of the work we do with the WHO is volunteer for the greater good of saving ears. It's just saving ears. And so we help our artists create social media posts and help them raise awareness with their fan base about safe listening with music. So it's really it's like the same tips every year, and that's
Mhm.
okay. I typically ask people to say, wear hearing protection, turn your levels down in your earbuds, and take listening breaks.
Mhm.
And if you have any concerns, see an audiologist.
Yeah.
And so it's really simple, and the graphics change every year. There's an official, 2025 graphic. And the theme this year is hearing care for all. And I feel like that's really apt based on the other things that we've been discussing.
Mhm.
We need to bring hearing care and make it accessible for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, it should be talked about more in
Mm-hmm.
schools. I wish
Mm-hmm.
it was, kind of like other health. Again, I remember getting our hearing tested in school when we were a kid, but
Yeah.
I don't know how much was behind it. They just like did some things and tested our eyes and had us leave the classroom.
Yeah.
But it should be talked about more. The government should have a little more information available for people. I think venues should, like what you brought up earlier. What was it, Hello?
The hella.
Hello.
Yeah.
Venues should maybe do workshops or have people come in and do a workshop to articulate and explain this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Acoustic treatment goes a long way in
Mm-hmm.
venues. It's not that expensive to
Yeah.
just do some cheap stuff. That'll help a lot. Sometimes it's just a venue's acoustics are horrible,
Yeah.
you know. Um, and yeah, I think musicians just need to. I don't. The access is there now. The internet, it's accessible. People can find out about hearing conservation, hearing wellness. So much
Yes.
more than when I was a little kid.
Oh, absolutely.
No one talked about it at all.
Absolutely.
It
Yeah.
was like weird to wear earplugs.
Yeah.
You
And
know.
I feel that stigma has changed a lot
Yes,
the last few
definitely.
years. I think because healthcare is so expensive,
Hmm.
people are more keen on trying to stay healthy and trying to engage in these preventative practices.
Hmm.
So especially, millennials and Gen Z, I see a lot of people coming in who I say, "What brings you in to see me?" And they say, I've seen my parents with hearing loss or in bands. The DJ community is
Oh yeah.
a big example. That's a subset of the musician population here in Chicago that I've become pretty friendly with. I
Hmm.
love my DJ patients. I'm a big fan of house music. But I realized, this population is logging longer and louder hours than other
Oh
genres.
my God, yes.
Yeah.
House music and
Hmm.
EDM is. I was working at a festival 2 years ago, and I was measuring the dB SPL of their main stage, and it was like a constant 122 decibels.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah. It's a
horrific.
lot. It's a lot.
It was.
Yeah.
I had in my negative 15s and negative like 35 ones on top of it,
Hmm.
and it was. I couldn't believe how loud it was.
Yeah.
And everyone, I mean, they're on drugs, they're dancing.
Yeah.
I'm not justifying, but that's just what's happening.
Yeah.
And which is probably even worse because you're not even aware of what's going on with your hearing
Yeah.
on certain drugs.
And engaging in risk-taking behaviors, like drug use, dehydration,
Hmm.
lack of sleep, exercising, dancing. When blood flow is changed like that in your ear, it actually makes you more susceptible to sound injury.
Mm.
So, here's a reminder. We all love listening to music when you go to the gym. Get motivated with your music, but don't blast your ears.
So you're saying your hearing gets better when you start getting blood circulation.
When blood is circulating to your ears while you're exercising, you are more susceptible to sound injury than when it's not. So when people are out at these EDM shows or whatever show, dancing away and maybe taking drugs, smoking, tobacco is a huge, huge driver of change in hearing health. So the point of this is, in addition to sound exposure, there's a lot of risky factors, risk-taking behaviors that go along with music creation and enjoyment that further increase your risk of sound-induced hearing loss.
Mm.
So something to keep in mind too.
Yeah.
But the original point of me dipping my toes into DJ hearing health was that I often hear from DJs in the clinic, what brings you in today? I DJ at this club, and every time I take over the booth from this, veteran in the industry, this legendary DJ, the volume is so, so loud because they have so much hearing loss. It's unbelievable. And I don't want to end up like that.
Hmm.
So I'm seeing a lot of we've now been, had the music industry.
I was just going to say, unfortunately, our
Yeah.
parents and their generation, the baby boomers and the Gen Xers, had to be the guinea pigs
Exactly.
for enough time to go on for us to get enough data,
Yes.
research, knowledge, education to learn. It's happened in every safety element of all work, from safety goggles to hard hats to hearing protection to steel toe boots. It had to take a lot of people getting hurt.
Yeah.
And we learned oh shoot, because our parents were the first generation to be around these loud concerts.
That's exactly right.
My great grandparents or grandparents did not go to concerts that were loud. They
No.
just didn't. It's 1940s. It just wasn't
That's
a thing.
exactly right. They weren't loud. Yeah. They were safe.
Yeah, they were safe.
Yeah. I'm in addition to being a house music fan, I'm a pretty big Beatles fan.
I could see more Beatles fan for you than
Yeah.
house music. That was a shocker that you said.
Oh,
house-
really?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been a Beatles fan as long as I've been a clarinetist, so my whole life. But you and I can have a separate podcast about the Beatles one day
Okay. I
we
could
do
talk Beatles a lot.
after we do the Golden Bachelor. We can have another podcast talking about the Beatles. What was the point of this? Oh, one thing that blew my mind was when I was learning about in-ear monitors and, the history of in-ear monitoring. We all know about the Beatles and Shea Stadium and how they couldn't hear because they just didn't have the equipment to hear properly. And then they quit touring. And I could not believe, it absolutely blew my mind when I realized if the Beatles had in-ear monitors, they would have continued touring.
I never thought about that.
Yeah, that was a wild realization, because then the next realization was, and if the Beatles had in-ear monitors, they wouldn't have had all that studio time,
All
and
those records.
we wouldn't have gotten Sgt. Pepper's.
White Album, all of them, because they had nothing else
Everything.
but
Yeah.
time to do that.
Exactly. Have
Do
you
you
seen
think-
Have you seen the 8 Days a Week documentary? Ron Howard's documentary.
I've seen that one and the
Yeah.
the Peter Jackson one on Disney was amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah.
But the 8 Days a Week just follows the touring years.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that really stuck with me was at the end, the Beatles quit touring. They just visually flipped through all of their studio albums that came after that. And it's unbelievable, the body of work that they put out in their post-touring years.
Yeah, it was like one or two every year, 2 a year really.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And like the best records over and over and
Yeah.
over again.
And so, if the Beatles had in-ear monitors, we probably wouldn't have gotten Sgt. Pepper's.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
I'm sure a factor also could have been how annoying the fans were to them.
I'm sure.
Because it was the first time fans were kind of like that. I mean, you get a little bit with Elvis, but
Yeah.
Beatlemania was truly a phenomenon.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
that's a good point. I never thought about the in-ear monitor thing with that.
Exactly.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the wall of sound speakers from the Grateful Dead with no monitors? But you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Like it's got to be. I have thoughts on it just knowing about phase cancellation with microphones, and I don't think that they would get a good full range out of their what they're recording through the microphones because of some of the phase being canceled.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it ended up being a big thing we learned about at Columbia, and everyone trying to like replicate it. I was like, this feels like a bad idea.
Yeah.
To put speakers behind. I don't care if it's in or out of phase. And then even if you do that, you're losing some stuff with the phase issue.
Yeah.
That's working with you to cancel out the sound behind you. That's how noise canceling headphones work, right? In a
Noise.
sense?
Well, we're starting to tiptoe out of my audiology
Okay.
knowledge, and I'm happy to admit that.
Okay.
That's how I
I'm
learn and
pretty sure
become
that's
better.
how they work.
But noise canceling headphones will play an out of phase wave, and something called destructive interference happens, and the energy from the wave is destroyed. And so, one question that I've been getting from patients is, "Are earpods hearing protection?" Question mark. What is noise cancellation actually doing? And there have been studies that, going back to the probe tube, like we talked about with DB Check, where they've put probe tubes down in ear canals and put Apple earbuds on top and put on the noise cancellation, and the amount of sound energy inside of the ear canal is reduced relative to outside. Like 20 dB or even more. So far more than we would expect from just the physical barrier of the earbud itself, which is
Yeah.
only going to be like 2 or 4 dB on a good day. But when you have a seal and when noise cancellation is engaged, it is reducing levels. which
I've
is
done it
great.
before
Yeah.
at a concert. I didn't have my Sensaphonics with me, unfortunately. Put those in, did the noise. It worked. It
Exactly.
did work.
And that's what I say. In a pinch or as a backup, they can be used as hearing protection, but physical fit is everything. You know, that's why we have you do those jaw movements when your ear molds are setting. We have you smile and do all these crazy jaws. Exactly, exactly. In addition to just being entertaining, it also improves the fit because all of that moves around your ear canal. So I have small ear canals, and when I listen to my AirPods with a universal fit tip, every time I smile, the cancellation cuts out because I've broken the seal. And so that's not going to be a good hearing protection option for me unless I'm going to stand still like a statue for the entire gig. And I'm not going to. I love to dance. So
Yeah.
I'm going to dance around. And so if you don't have a passive physical plug to wear, I'm happy for people to use AirPods as a backup. But I'm a little skeptical of having that be the primary
Right.
solution.
It should be
Yeah.
last resort if you have another chance
Yeah.
or another shot for anything else. Do that. It does work.
Yeah, and then if you care about sound quality, with the transparency mode and noise reduction settings and all of that, you're going to start to run into compression, right? Whereas the passive plug is going to be just you're going to get the full dynamic range, just at a lower, safer level.
Yeah. So there are some things with AirPods because a lot of people have AirPods going to the gaming AirPod conversation. On Apple, you can get they can let you know in the health part, like how loud, how many decibels your audio is, and how long you should be exposed. Are there any other apps or anything you would recommend, or people just keep an eye on that? Make sure they keep an eye on. What would you recommend if someone's going to listen to music for many hours?
Yeah. So there is. I don't speak Android quite as good as I do iPhone. But yeah, with iPhone and the health app, you can toggle on headphone notifications where you'll get an alert if you've gone over your weekly allowance for listening. But on that same page under sounds and haptics, you can toggle on reduce loud sounds and you can set a maximum limit essentially to
Yeah.
your volume. And so I usually put mine at 90 dB.
Same.
Great. Yes. So good. 90 dB is great.
Especially with noise canceling because you're not competing with the outside world.
Exactly.
They're actually safer for you.
Exactly.
You know.
And so I often listen well below 90 dB. But then if, a great song comes on, I want to put it up for a couple minutes. I go all
house
the way
music
to
comes on.
90.
Some Gene
Yeah.
Ferris comes on.
Rocky Raccoon. No, I'm just joking.
You want to blast Rocky Raccoon?
No, I don't. But yeah, again, it's better to be consistent than it is to be perfect. So I used to say, a couple of years ago, I said, put it at 85 because you can listen to 85 for 8 hours. And then, it's fine to listen to 90 for a few minutes too.
Yeah.
And that would be one thing I would suggest to audiologists who are new to working with musicians or wanting to work with musicians. You can have the perfect hearing conservation plan on paper, but it doesn't mean anything if it's not realistic for the person that you're working with.
Absolutely.
It's so important to have the gold standard and the benchmarks, but to actually understand where the musician's at, make sure you're speaking the same language, and that you can both agree on a realistic, practical plan for them to use, and to build their knowledge with all these different safe listening strategies. So when they leave your office, they're not locked into this rigid prescription. They can be active critical thinkers in their hearing healthcare and make decisions on a case-by-case basis as they're moving throughout the world, whether it's live music or recorded music. So that's a huge thing. And there's a lot of nuance to doing that.
Yeah, it's different for everyone. And yeah, unless you know their lifestyle, their work, what they do for work, their diet. Yeah, it is complicated. It's not super easy, but just getting people to think about it, use some type of hearing protection.
Yeah.
Be aware that it's not just how loud something is, but duration. How long are you exposed to that loud thing? It could be 90 decibels, but if it's 16 hours straight, that could start to be a problem.
Yeah.
You know?
And so addition to, setting some limits on the phone, listening breaks too.
Yes.
So
Take breaks.
take breaks.
Listener's fatigue is very real.
Yeah. And I see a lot of people in the clinic with listening fatigue, where they're saying, I'm wearing my earplugs. My ears don't ring, but I feel like tired. I feel wiped out. Or they'll say, I'm really having trouble hearing in noise. And, we do the hearing test, or we do a speech and noise test as well, which is different than the pure tone test. We can actually measure your performance in a noisy situation, because sometimes you nail the hearing test on its own, listening for the beeps and raising your hand, normal across the board. But then you actually break down when you get into a noisy environment, because that's such a complex listening situation instead. But many times we have people score normal on that, and they're shocked because they're saying, I don't understand. Last week I went out to dinner and I just couldn't hear the conversation. I said, what was your day like before dinner? And they've been listening to 12 hours of sound. Even if it's at a safe level, again, your hearing is your survival sense. And the amount of energy that your brain uses to process sound on a daily basis is significant. It's a very complex task. And so I've started prescribing listening breaks, even if your sound exposure is safe. A couple 5-minute breaks a day, just let the whole system rest. And don't replace a listening break with scrolling on your phone, right? Take an actual break
What
for
do you do
5
for your
minutes.
listening breaks?
I just watch paint dry. I have a little bucket. I just paint the wall and watch it dry.
Stare at it.
Yeah.
No, for real. What do you do for yours?
I just set a timer and I just sit there. I don't meditate. I'm not very good at meditating. I try. But I just sit there, and sometimes I'll just let my thoughts wander, do some deep breathing.
It sounds like a form of meditation.
Yeah.
It's close.
Yeah. I let the thoughts wander, but I don't try to reel them in, or I don't try to note them, right? You're supposed to say, oh, my mind's wandering. I let it go, and I go back to nothing. I realize that I've wandered, and I say, how far down this path can we go? What is at the end of that path? So, yeah, I just sit there.
Does it get exhausting seeing clients all day with this? Do you ever start to wonder, like, am I losing my mind, my hearing?
When my first 6 months at Sensaphonics, I was like a student again. Even though I had a rotation there, the knowledge I was learning and the skill set I was building was so unique compared to anything that I've done that I just felt like a student of music industry hearing conservation. I was exhausted when I went home, even though I loved what I was doing, but I was seeing patients in the clinic, then going home and learning about concepts. And you know what a student is. You've been a student.
Of course.
But yeah, I felt like a student for the first 6 months, and that amount of learning takes so much brain power. I was exhausted. But now that I've hit cruising altitude, I feel good at the end of the day. Like if you had asked me to do this podcast within the first 6 months of me practicing, I would say, I have to see you on a Saturday.
Or give me 6 months.
Yeah. I was like, I need to go to sleep. I'm really tired.
Well, I appreciate you coming in and doing this.
Oh my gosh, it's been amazing. It's been amazing. But yeah, when I take care of patients myself, I don't feel tired because I'm so excited to help. No 2 days are the same. Even if I'm physically at Sensaphonics 5 days in a row, no 2 days are the same with who I'm seeing, what they need, what we talk about. And then I'm out running around on, evenings and weekends in the music world too. What does make me tired is teaching. I'll precept students in the clinic, and I love to precept the students, but I know doing your job is so different than doing your job and then explaining to someone else how you do your job. And then the patient leaves and you continue to explain how to help the patient. That's a depth that I'm still learning how to do. I've had probably a dozen students come through the clinic in the last 2.5 years, some for, 2 days a week times 10 weeks, some for just 1 week. They'll travel out of state to come spend a week at Sensaphonics and learn what we do.
Oh, wow.
And which is amazing. This younger generation of audiology students are so excited about what we do because they're living this. They're living unregulated sound exposure, and they have their whole life. And a lot of them are very cautious, and obviously they're audiology students, but I'm always struck how much knowledge they have by the time they come to see me. And I know when I was at my point in my schooling, I hardly knew anything, and
Okay.
they're showing up informed and ready to learn, which is amazing.
That's good. So the knowledge is spreading.
Yeah,
Yeah, the information is there, much
exactly.
more readily available than before.
Exactly. And one of our goals at Sensaphonics is to get a curriculum into doctorate programs to just standardize what we're teaching people. There was not a standard of care, best practices for working with musicians until January of 2020 for audiologists.
What? Really?
Yeah.
What took so long?
It's the industry is so underserved. It's so underserved. Like I said, Sensaphonics has been around since 1985. There are probably only a dozen audiologists in the country who work full time with music industry patients.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow, it's that rare.
Yeah. So the majority of audiologists are working a non music caseload, and then they have a number of musicians coming through the clinic, a couple times a week, maybe only a couple times a month. But audiologists like myself and a number of the other ones who I've mentioned on the podcast, there's only about a dozen of us doing this full time in the States.
Wow, that is insane.
It
There's
is.
millions of musicians.
I know. I know.
Oh my God, there's not enough of you.
There's not.
How could you even take care of you? They can come in all day, every day, forever. You would never see everyone.
Exactly. And that's why we need to get this into school. We need to have audiologists graduating knowing what to do when a musician comes into the door, because we're only going to see it more and more because the sound injury is so rampant.
Yeah, like you were saying, 50%. Yeah, I mean, again, the AirPods, video games, I have a lot of students that are in video game design. And video games are really cool, really great. I don't play them that much, but I understand the hype. And I have students, no kidding, that have told me that they played for 16 hours straight.
Yeah,
And that is not in silent mode. So
exactly.
16 hours straight, 12 hours, 8 hours, 20 hours, all-nighters. These games really hook some 20-year-olds,
Yeah.
But that's so much sound exposure.
It's a lot of sound exposure because just like music, it's part of the experience, right? To the point where the World Health Organization has actually created a dedicated subcommittee on sound exposure in gaming. And they've done that in the last couple of years. So they're really starting to pay close attention to this. One thing that they're doing, they're surveying gamers and trying to figure out, most gamers are aware that their hearing is at risk. What steps are they willing to take to mitigate it? And the WHO is starting to recommend to some of these gaming manufacturers with headsets, or I know some of the chairs have built-in speakers too, to put some sort of, like we do in our phones, the headphone notification,
Yeah.
having that in gaming headphones and equipment as well,
Yeah.
to at least give people knowledge. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Give people knowledge, and they can decide what they do with the information. But they can't make an educated decision if they're not educated.
Right. And if you put that in there, not everyone's going to know what it means, but someone will. And people start talking like, oh, you know what that is? I guess if it hits like 90, it means be careful. Stuff like that
Yeah.
kids talk. It starts to circulate. The technology gets available.
Exactly. Exactly.
Almost starts to work its way out through just existing. Just like the phone one. I've heard people who are not in audio talk about the decibel meter on their phone, saying like, oh, it says if it gets to this number, it's kind of dangerous. They don't know what it means. They just know
Yeah.
red, green, yellow,
Yeah.
Sometimes it's that simple.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So just you travel, teach in the clinic, do a lot of fitting, do a lot of hearing. You said you used to work in a hospital, and was that mostly what were you dealing with mostly there if it wasn't musicians?
So I was working with, I would say about 70% adults, 30% pediatrics. So 3 days a week I was doing the audiology schedule. So just seeing people for evaluations, prescribing and fitting hearing aids. But then 2 days a week I was covering the ENT clinic, where I was seeing 30 patients in 2 hours or something like
What
that.
does ENT stand for?
Ear, nose, and throat doctor.
Oh,
So
my favorite.
I know it was it was some audiologists absolutely thrive in that environment. Be working with an ENT. I do not, because the reason that I wanted to become an audiologist was to, yes, help people, but also get to know people too. Get to feel like I'm helping and providing care and having a human connection. And when you're working at that pace, it's really hard to do that. So I used to get a printout of the ENT schedule, and it would be like 5 pages long with just lists of names. And I would go through and put an E next to the ones that sounded like they might need a hearing test, because not everyone who was going in to be seen for ears needed a hearing test. Sometimes I just needed wax taken out. But I saw a lot of pediatrics on that rotation. And kids aren't really my thing, and that's okay.
The way your eyes just fluttered.
Yeah.
For those who couldn't see, priceless. Kids are not your thing, I believe you. You're just
No.
like, they have like a brain. Like, did you ever see Severance on Apple TV?
No, it's on my list though.
Okay, then you wouldn't get this. But like when they, forget it. Anyway, you gotta get with pop culture. You don't know what I'm talking about.
I love pop culture. But no, it's on. I just don't have Apple TV right now. Do you want to share your password?
Yeah, let me tell you it right now.
Cool. Let me just write it down. And what's your mother's maiden name while we're at it?
So you don't like kids?
No. So great audiologist. I helped a lot of kids. I was happy to go back to adults. I really thrive 16 to 99.
People who
Yeah.
so just not kids.
Yeah.
At 100, get them out of here. I don't
Yeah.
want anyone who's 100 in my house.
Exactly.
So is it because kids move around too much? It's hard to work on their ears?
I feel the stakes are so high. The stakes are so high when you're working with a kid with hearing. If you misdiagnose them as normal hearing and they have a hearing loss, you could be the reason that they don't develop speech and language. The thought of that is terrifying to me.
I see your point. Yeah.
Also the crying. But mostly
And you know what frequency range crying is in?
highs.
That sweet spot.
The ultra highs.
And it's, yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if our ear canal shape developed because of baby crying.
It very well could.
They're like, we got to make sure it's that size, says evolution, so we can really hear those cries from a mile away. Mm-hmm. I wonder.
I had sometimes, that just makes me remember, once in a while, maybe once a quarter, I get someone on their intake form where we have a really, I should send it to you because I think you'd get a kick out of it. You filled it out, but we have a really thorough, unique intake form at Sensaphonics, really getting to the nitty gritty of sound exposure, how much, how long, what quality, where is it, and all of this. And despite having such a thorough workup, we still leave space to say, any other sources of noise? And someone will always write, my kids.
Kids are crazy.
They say, I control for music. What I can't control is my 3-year-old screaming in my ear.
So loud.
I say, wear your 9 dB filters.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
Put in the 9s.
Yeah.
They're not going to be offended. They don't
They
know.
don't even know.
Yeah,
They're like, I want one. Where'd
Yeah.
you get that?
exactly. Like, not until you're 8. You got to wait for your ear canals to develop.
Kids have such a bad, bad dynamic control. They're just like all over
Yeah.
the place. Mm. That's interesting. I never thought about working with kids and their hearing development because it affects speech so much.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, and also there's a lot of, besides music, there's so many other things that cause hearing damage, different diseases and viruses, and it's the ear, because of how it's connected in dealing with balance and then going to your jaw. There's so many other things that take in consideration.
Yes.
You know.
Yes. And I mean, that's, looping back to tinnitus, there are so many things that can cause tinnitus outside of sound exposure. Jaw tension, neck tension, congestion. There are somatic things that can cause tinnitus, that the cells in the ear are healthy, but these other sources are exacerbating the issue.
How do you know? Is there certain like MRI or something you can? How do you see and tell if the hair cells are healthy and something else is causing?
So if we're doing the audiological evaluation, They're wearing hearing protection. They say, I wear my plugs. Hearing's been stable since your last exam, but tinnitus is getting worse. The first thing I say after I've rolled out all these other things is, do you know if you grind your teeth? And they do, because there's this radiation up into your ear. Sometimes I have people complaining of ear pain. Look in the canal. It's as beautiful as ever. A healthy looking eardrum has a pearly sheen to it. Of course it does.
I see them all the time.
It's so lovely.
It's so beautiful.
But I look in the ear, there's this beautiful pearly eardrum, no redness, no infection. Do you grind your teeth? Actually, I do. I will often send people, I'll say the next time you have your teeth cleaned, ask your dentist if you're grinding your teeth. And it turns out that they are, and they just don't realize it in their sleep. And so that can make tinnitus louder. Earwax in your ear. A plugged up ear canal of earwax can cause tinnitus or make underlying tinnitus
So what
louder.
should people do about earwax? From your professional opinion
Yes.
about the brand Q-tips.
Yes. This is such a great question. I'm not a Q-tip purist. I'm not going to scold someone for
I was
using
told not to
Q-tips.
put anything smaller than my elbow in the ear.
I think a Q-tip has its time and place, and I hope I don't get dragged by my peers for this. But you can use a Q-tip to clean the outside of your ear, or if you've got a little bit of wax at the entrance of the ear canal, that's fine. What we're trying to avoid is have someone stick it deep in their ear canal. I'm not worried about you perforating your eardrum. Before you even get there, you're going to have quite a bit of discomfort, because once we move from that cartilage portion to the bone, that is really sensitive. So when people start feeling that in their ear, that's what they're feeling.
It's the
You're not
bone.
getting close to your eardrum. Yeah, that's part of the reason we have nerve endings like that, to stop you from doing that. But what ends up happening is you push wax in deeper. So at that portion between the cartilage and the bone, the skin in the ear canal, it's called extrusion. It grows outwards very slowly. So you can think of the skin in your ear moving outwards like a tiny, slow conveyor belt, and it dumps out little pieces of wax over time.
That's all it is your skin, hair, or skin cells just slowly going outward.
Outwards,
They
yep.
can't go anywhere else.
Exactly. And so when you put a Q-tip in your ear, you're resetting the conveyor belt back to zero, and then you get a wax buildup. So what I recommend is a little earwax is a good thing. It's antibacterial, it's antifungal, it's toxic to insects.
So it's what keeps the insects out of your ear.
Yep,
That's what I always tell people.
exactly. Yeah. It's good for you. It's there for a reason.
Isn't it the same thing as your mucus and your saliva? For your all your orifices will excrete things for that reason.
But it's
part of that reason.
But it's different because your earwax is lined with skin. It's not a mucous membrane.
You're right.
So, back in the early days of COVID, I saw this Facebook post that was like, plug up your ears so you don't catch COVID. And it's like, no.
What frequency is COVID at?
Exactly.
Is it above my human hearing range? I don't know. It's probably
Exactly.
way up there.
Exactly. I know. I was like, okay, we do have bigger fish to fry than this, but yeah, that's a myth that we don't need to start that sort of rumor that you can catch COVID or any virus through your ears.
Okay.
Because your eardrum is your tympanic membrane, but again, not that kind of membrane. It's not a mucous membrane that's going to absorb anything. So to deal with earwax, drops, over-the-counter wax drops. There's generic, there's Debrox or Earwax MD. These
Just
are
kinda
things you can.
loosens it up.
It softens the wax, and then you can use a little bulb syringe to flush your ear out with warm water. And that's a really safe and effective way for you to handle wax at home. Do not use hydrogen peroxide. It's way too strong for the chemistry of your ear.
I used to use that when I was a kid when we had to have like a swimmer's
Yeah,
ear, you know?
yeah.
And that's just water trapped in your ear and you get like a little bit of an infection, right? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Because your
spent a
ear
lot of
canal
time in
has
lakes.
your ear canal has twists and turns in it. I know you've seen with your custom plugs, but every diagram you look at of an ear canal makes it look like it's this straight tunnel, and it's not. It's got a couple bends. Most ear canals are actually tilted upwards at a 45-degree angle
Why is that?
to try to prevent things from going straight down and nailing your eardrum, would be my guess.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are shaped funny. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I never saw inside my ear.
But
Like I never saw inside.
Inside,
I'm
yeah.
I'm like, I know the shape of that now.
Yeah.
How far in? It's like an inch inch and a half.
It's about 2.5 centimeters.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's the
Wow.
average ear canal length.
Okay. So don't clean your ears with anything but over the counter, ear loosening drops
Yeah.
or earwax loosening drops. Okay.
And, I would do that once a quarter. Be conservative with it because if you start to over clean your ears, again, we want a little bit of wax in there for the beneficial properties. If you start to over clean your ears, then it's dry and irritated and itchy, and then that's a whole nother ball game that you don't want to play.
Do you ever get weary watching like UFC or anything and just know that one punch can make you go deaf forever? Someone just punches you like in the ear, the wrong angle, the wrong way, the wrong force.
Well, with a barotrauma is what that is. Most of the time, it's not pretty, but if you have a perforation in your eardrum and you're a healthy adult, it will regrow.
Okay.
In most situations, you might have a little bit of residual scarring on the eardrum, but it typically doesn't impact your hearing,
Okay.
which is great.
Okay. Because I know someone
Yeah.
who got a friend of mine, like a water bottle like this was thrown and hit them in the ear, and they have had like most
Yeah.
of their hearing in that ear has been gone their whole life because of it.
Yeah. And so, there are other physical traumas that can cause hearing loss. If it's a perforated eardrum alone, it should be okay. But behind your eardrum are the ossicles, which are 3 little bones.
My
And
3 bones.
yeah, you got it. And that's such a trivia question. Trivia loves the ossicles. Oh my God. Everywhere. It's everywhere.
Trivia.
Jeopardy,
Oh,
connections, like the New York Times games.
the Incus, the Malleus, and the Stapes.
Yes. And what are the layman's terms?
The anvil, the sternum, and the no, the anvil, sternum, and the I don't know.
The hammer.
Hammer. Ah,
That was good,
I know
though.
the technical ones, but not the layman's
Yeah,
ones.
exactly.
I don't speak like lames.
You don't speak lames.
I don't speak
yeah.
lames. I know technical
I'm actually a
terms.
professional, so
And I always tell my students, like, learn what this stuff means, but don't use it in normal talking. People don't say like, my tympanic membrane's been touched. You
Right.
Don't do that.
I don't
Only
say
you
that.
can
Yeah.
do that.
And even I don't
Yeah.
most of the time. I'm like, this is your eardrum.
Like, learn what they are and just call them the 3
Yeah.
bones in your body, the eardrum, the oval window, just some basic stuff.
Yeah.
Don't get too obsessed with it.
Exactly. And that's what I tell some of my students when I'm precepting. I basically have like a 2-minute anatomy and physiology 101. So after we do the patient's case history, I have this big diagram of the ear behind me that I literally turn and say, let's learn about how this works. And so I have a whole 2-minute spiel where I guide them from the air to the brain, what's going on. And the first day that I take a student and I get them acclimated to the clinic, I let them know that the way I'm about to describe this is not the exact textbook words, and that's okay. Which when you're in grad school, it seems like that's the end of the world. How could you say vibrations when it's actually mechanical energy, right? I get it. But the point is, the goal of this spiel is to get the musician excited about the hearing system and understand what's going on. And if I'm trying to wave my doctorate degree around and use all these intricate terms that they're never going to retain, what is the point?
Yes, it's one of my biggest pet peeve
Yeah.
with those who might have a law degree, a doctorate degree, a professor, doesn't really matter, and they use $10, $15, $20 word only, and they don't kind of make it easier to comprehend. Some people never went to college. Some people can't read that well.
Yeah.
Some people are smart, but they just never been exposed to certain ways of thinking. So if you could just simplify, especially for health. I mean,
Exactly.
come on.
Exactly.
Of course, there's always a more Latin way to say the word.
Yeah.
That's, of course, we
Yeah.
all know that, but this is not medical school. It's not
No.
the classroom. And guess what? You can speak that way when you're with your other colleagues that are
Yes.
of that place. and
That's
level.
exactly right.
Then have that fun then, that nerdy fun then. But when you're with a student or younger folk, or even someone who's elderly, but they don't know what you're talking about, you got to simplify it. And it's for any doctor in any background, you know? Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I have my doctorate degree on the wall behind me. So they're like, she's really casual. What's going on here? It's fine.
Is it weird when you first hang that up?
It was because in my first two positions, I didn't have my doctorate degree on the wall because I was at a hospital and then I was at someone else's private practice and I wasn't calling the shots there. And so I finally have my own office at Sensaphonics where I can put what I'd like on the wall, and it was cool. It was cool to pick a frame out, put it in, hang it up. And my degree from UVM is up there too. I'm so proud to be a native Vermonter.
And that was in, what was the background for that one again? Your
So
undergrad?
that was Communication Sciences and Disorders, which is the umbrella undergrad or the umbrella major for both speech and audiology.
Oh, okay.
And so to become a speech pathologist, you have to get a master's. So that undergrad is through the lens of knowing that this is a stepping stone onto higher education.
Okay.
But you don't have to have a comp-sci background to go to school and become an audiologist. I would say 70% of my class came from comp-sci, but we had a couple undergrad psych majors, biology majors. Not in my class, but a number of audio engineers just really drink the hearing Kool-Aid and they end up going to school again and becoming an audiologist, which is awesome.
About it for a while.
Yeah.
Back in the day before I chose a different route, I was thinking about it because I really was into it. I still am, but I like to know it and give people kind of like a little bit of a superficial rundown of it, and then again pass them further down the line to more expertise.
And that's the thing is, what you're doing is you are interested in the hearing system and you're passionate about trying to educate people. And that's exactly what you're doing. And you have a means to be able to do that without going and getting a whole doctorate degree in it. Yeah.
No, it's nice. It'd be nice to learn more. But you have any you recommend any good books to learn more about the hearing system, the ear, the brain? I'm more concerned about the auditory nerve because how does it happen? What's going on that it gets translated into the world we see? I know you'd have to talk to probably a neurologist for that.
The auditory nerve, like the cochlea, is organized according to pitch. So the way that the nerve is wired, it's a bundle of nerves, and different nerves are helping to code different frequencies, which is incredible.
Yeah.
And so that's why we actually call it sensory neural hearing loss as opposed to just a sensory hearing loss, because when you measure it, it's difficult to differentiate. Is this a problem with the hair cell in the cochlea, or is it a problem with the nerve itself? Or is it a problem with the connection between the cell and the nerve in the synapse?
And the only way to know that, surgery, go in and look at it?
It depends. Typically not surgery. If there's something going on where these red flags are popping up, imaging, an fMRI or a CT scan. Luckily, and part of the reason that I love being an audiologist is there's usually nothing life-threatening causing a change in hearing. There are things to monitor for sure. For example, there's something called a vestibular schwannoma, or acoustic neuroma is another term for it. It's a benign tumor on your hearing nerve, and it's very slow growing, and it's something that you monitor over time, but there's the treatment for it. If it gets to a point where it might compress your brainstem, which is something we want to avoid, then we go in and take it out. But most of the time you lose the hearing in that ear as a result.
I was just going to say this happened to, I believe, my sister-in-law in her left ear. She had a tumor in there. They took it out, and she said it's like 90% gone her hearing.
It's so hard.
Which I'm just...
It's so hard.
It was benign. It just happened.
I know.
What if that happened to me? Then what? That's terrible. I don't know what I would do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've had a couple musicians that it's happened to. One is Jesus Flores, I believe is his last name. I just met him at NAMM show. I've heard of him a ton. He's a fiddler, and he's just like a human ray of sunshine. What a lovely, lovely man. But I'll send you a podcast. So I know I'm on your podcast, but there's another podcast called Talking Ears.
Okay.
This is by two music audiologists, Juan Vasquez and Frank Wardinger, who are two of my peers. They're really awesome guys. And in addition to working with the music industry, they have this podcast called Talking Ears where they talk about pretty much what we're talking about today, but in a different angle. But they had Jesus on their podcast, and the whole reason I bring this up is he had a case like that where he's this world-renowned fiddler, and he abruptly lost the hearing in one of his ears from this acoustic neuroma, but he's able to continue playing because Sensaphonics has an in-ear monitor called 3DME. It's an in-ear monitor that has ambient microphones on the earpieces. So when the ambient mics are engaged, the musician has full localization because it's mimicking the open ear response, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And the reason that we made it is to prevent all the way back to the start. The second piece of safe use of in-ear monitors after turning down your levels is keeping both ears in. And we see a lot of people pulling out one in-ear monitor, and that's really bad for the exposed ear because of the ambient sound levels, but then you have to crank up your monitor ear to hear properly because you lose binaural summation. So when your brain is listening to inputs from both of the ears, it synthesizes that information. So if you've got nice clean sound coming into two earpieces, your brain is going to boost up your perception of loudness without you having to turn up your pack. But when you pull an earphone out, you lose binaural summation, and then the monitor ear gets cranked up. So when I do hearing tests on musicians who pull out one in-ear monitor, it's their monitor ear that tends to have more hearing loss in it. So what we did was we said, why are they doing this? They feel too disconnected from their surroundings. So let's give them their ambience. And I know we all know about putting an ambient mic on the stage. That's a great, simple, and accessible way to add a sense of ambience in, but you don't have any localization. So this is a way for musicians to have true ambient sound in their mix. What we have found since making this is that musicians can use it as hearing loss correction because they can control the mics with an app on their phone where they can set the mic levels and change 7 different bands of EQ.
Oh, wow.
Which is awesome. You should come in for a demo and
I
try
would
it
love
out.
to.
Yeah.
That sounds so cool.
Yeah. And then we'll get you new plugs too.
Please.
Absolutely. And then there's a cross feature. So cross is a concept and an acronym that we borrowed from hearing aid world. It stands for contralateral routing of signal. So when you toggle on the cross in the app, you can send the ambient mic info to the good ear. So what Dr. Santucci did with Jesus is, I think it was his left ear, but we'll say that the left ear had a total loss. They were able to route the sound from the ambient mic in the left ear over to the right ear. So he had stereo sound in the right ear again.
Wow.
And so it changed everything. And he could stay in the industry. And he just won a Grammy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing with that. Wow.
Yeah.
So it's a great example of technology meeting healthcare, meeting art, where they kind of have this symbiotic thing.
Yeah.
Technology is a great tool and it doesn't have to replace us. But it can be married with that, especially with healthcare.
Exactly.
That's pretty remarkable that we could do that kind of stuff now.
It is. And, speaking about technology has been incredible for pro audio. It's been incredible for hearing aids. At the end of the day, part of healthcare is having the human touch too. So I'm really not concerned that, technology is going to run me out of the business or
It'd be terrible.
yeah,
There's nothing better than hanging out with a doctor and having them look at stuff and tell you what's going on.
exactly.
So much better than if an AI model's like, you are good today.
Yeah.
You passed the test. Come back in 6 months.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's fun to talk, laugh,
It is.
humor. I don't know.
And when something's going on, to be able to sit down with someone who says, it's going to be okay.
Yes.
I know you have this ringing in your ears. I know it's freaking you out. Whatever happens, it's going to be okay. I promise you. And to be able to sit down with another human being and have that reassurance is a game changer for sure.
Yeah, that's not easy information to deliver to someone, especially when it's their livelihood or their passion,
Yeah.
you know?
And so, when I have to give bad, you know, maybe bad information or negative information, I'm always reassuring. I know this is not what you want to hear.
Hmm.
I know this is not what we were hoping for. You're going to have music in your life. I have a plan. And if this plan doesn't work, we're going to do the next one. And if that doesn't work, we're going to do the next one.
Hmm.
We have a long, long, long ways to go before we say music is not a part of your life anymore. And knock on wood, but I have not had that experience yet. I haven't had a patient in the last 2.5 years where things progressed to a point where they quit the industry.
Okay.
And that was not always the case, right?
Hmm.
People coming up in the 70s and the 80s, we have, we're talking about the generational differences again, but there were tons of people who had to just quit music because their ears were wrecked.
Hmm.
And it just doesn't have to be that way anymore. We have
No.
the knowledge, we have the tools, we have hearing health ambassadors like you. And that's always my sneaky goal when I have a patient. I'm there to take care of them. I'm there to provide their health care. But I also have a little side quest where I hope they're so excited about their hearing by the time that they leave that they tell their peers about it.
Hmm.
They tell their fans about it. And they help us build this network of knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah, strength in numbers.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely been working. People are not so. When I was younger, when you were younger, I feel like we're about the same age. I don't know, but people were definitely more standoffish. My dad, my uncles were kind of like, I don't know, I don't need that, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever they thought. But we know so much now, and a lot of people sadly had to get hurt or lose their hearing or have
Yeah.
damage for us to learn all of this information.
Mm-hmm.
Which do you like, NIOSH or OSHA better? Their number standards.
I like NIOSH better. I think it makes more sense with a 3 dB trade-off with actual levels. And it protects about 96% of the general population based off of average risk. OSHA protects about 75% of the general population. So OSHA is easier to follow, but I follow NIOSH. And when I educate patients, I explain that. I give them the standards. I say, you can make a decision about which one you want to follow. And maybe sometimes you end up mixing and matching, and that's okay too. But as long as people are consistent with their safe listening strategies, that's what counts in the long run.
And which one regulates like work, like professional
OSHA.
OSHA?
Mm-hmm.
It's just more lenient.
Yep.
That's how they get
It's
away with it. That's
it.
why those construction workers are still damaged.
Seriously. Yeah.
Oh,
No, it's easier for
it's a little bit of a lazy.
employers
Yeah.
to implement. It doesn't protect as many people.
Yeah, and those people implementing it, they're not down there doing that work. They have
No.
no idea how loud it is. What about firearm safety as far as hearing? Because
Mm-hmm.
isn't it true that you could still have a lot of bone induction and loud vibrations still affecting your hearing, even if you're wearing hearing protection with firearms?
You can. And for that reason, we always recommend doubling up on hearing protection. So wearing, a solid plug or a foam insert inside the canal and then putting giant muffs on top. Because a lot of those muffs are big enough to block off some
Yeah.
of that bone conduction.
Yeah.
So double hearing protection when we can. Same, I know we're talking about impulse noise, but sometimes I see discussions on threads where people are concerned about the bass at music festivals that, oh, I'm wearing my earplugs, but the bass is doing
Your
bone
body's
conduction.
just shaking so much.
And yeah, exactly. And I know you can feel that your jeans are like vibrating because the bass is so loud. But you have your head itself, your skull itself is able to absorb a good amount of energy in addition to your earplug that the average concert or even festival day, even if you're pretty close, I'm not so concerned about bone conducted sound injury.
It'd be more like like heavy duty military,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
shooting like war stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, and then at that point, it's like I don't even know what you can do if you're literally in a firefight, like
Yeah,
with your hearing, you know?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And the military, they get the newest stuff
Oh, I bet
when
they
it
get the
comes.
best.
Yeah, they get the best stuff. So, I always kind of have my eye on what is the military putting out for hearing protection. What sort of technology do they have? They put out some really impressive stuff as far as hearing conservation goes, which they should,
Yeah, that's where
because
it's the worst.
yeah, I
Guns are so loud.
they're loud.
Unbelievably loud. I don't really
Yeah,
shoot them often, but I have, and they are unbelievably loud.
yeah. And I did the VA. I did my residency at the VA at Lovell up in North Chicago. So interestingly, another patient population with a ton of sound-induced hearing loss, but from a very, very different source. And what's so interesting about that population is, tinnitus is the most service-connected ailment in the VA. And service connection, for someone who might not know, is if a veteran has come back from war and they have a physical disability from their time serving, they can get evaluated and get compensated for it. Tinnitus is the most service connected condition. Tons and tons of veterans come back with tinnitus from sound exposure. And to this point, audiology as a profession was created because of the amount of veterans coming home after World War II with hearing loss because of how loud it was. It was the
Yeah.
loudest war at that point.
Yeah, first time you had artillery
Yep.
that was shooting, a mile away on a boat.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the explosions, yeah.
So that's the entire reason my entire profession was created, was because of military noise exposure in the 40s. So audiology isn't even 100 years old yet.
Wow.
Yeah.
My grandpa, he was the first person that introduced me into that world because he was in World War II in the Pacific on a battleship with big guns, and he would talk about it, and he's like, I can't hear anything I haven't been able to hear since then. And this was in the
Yeah.
90s, so 50 years later.
Yeah.
And he had hearing aids, and he just couldn't hear anything.
Yeah.
When my mom said, Grandpa's watching you, I got excited because I knew he wouldn't hear anything I did, and I can just get away with anything.
That's horrible. I mean, it's funny, but it's also like, oh.
It's sad that people, again, we had to learn from those generations.
Yes, exactly.
Which is unfortunate.
It is. And, working with that population was really interesting because the nature of how they sustained, tinnitus is usually connected to something horrible that happened. And so now they have this permanent ringing in their ears, and it's a constant memory of what's happened. And so much of my work at the VA and tinnitus coping was I was kind of unofficially doing a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy. And now we have whole protocols where, psychologists and audiologists are working together to triage these patients through that. But that was just starting to come on the scene when I was a student there. The concept of using like mindfulness meditation and CBT to address tinnitus, because going back to the start of the podcast, it's a neurological disorder and it's so tightly tied to your nervous system. And so what's really interesting is on the complete opposite side of the spectrum, musicians sustain tinnitus from something they love, but then they're very upset that they've injured their hearing system and it's going to prevent them from doing the thing that they love. So two really highly emotionally charged situations. And that's why in these populations, the amount of people who feel that their tinnitus is bothersome, I would suspect is higher. And I'm going to go look at studies after this podcast because I'm realizing I'm not sure that's been studied exclusively. Musicians, the recurring theme is music industry is understudied in the literature. So part of the reason, another reason that we're having difficulty getting music-focused hearing healthcare services is because we don't have any white papers. We have a few of them, but considering how many musicians there are, there's not nearly enough.
Yeah.
And so I'm
I wonder how
wondering,
that's possible. There's so much. Yeah, so many musicians. We have the technology now to measure
Yeah.
stuff, to run studies.
and so what I'm wondering, and there very well could be a study on it, and I'll find out, but now I'm wondering, have we looked at what percentage of musicians report their tinnitus as bothersome compared to the general population. We know that the music industry sustains higher rates of tinnitus compared to the general
How
population.
could you not? Yeah.
Right. That's well established. But I don't know if we've quantified the emotional impact that it has on them. I can only assume it's more musicians find tinnitus to be more bothersome compared to the
Yeah.
general population.
Well, it's connected to your passion, maybe your
Exactly.
way of making money, maybe how you met your friends, your social norms,
Hmm.
your identity, your culture. Yeah, it's a big one, and I know a few people that have it, and I have a friend that I could see how depressing it made her
Yeah.
feel and how sad she was all the time because of it.
Hmm.
And it's stuff like that I had to learn, unfortunately, from their experiences or mistakes, and I got doubled down on my safety and just super careful all the time.
Yeah.
And again, you get used to it. For those that think like, I want to hear loud music, it's like, trust me, it'll still be loud.
Yeah.
It's maybe 95 decibels is better than 110, and 95 is plenty loud,
Hmm.
especially with subwoofers and you feel the bass vibrating.
Exactly.
It's fine.
Exactly. We're so past, and I'm not an audio engineer, but I know we're so past the days where the only way to enjoy music is to just turn up the volume.
Yeah.
You can mix properly and keep the levels down and give people that experience that they want to feel with music while keeping their ears healthy. And that's
Yeah.
exactly what the hell is going to be doing.
Oh, yeah, hell, I forgot. Every time
Yeah.
you say that, I just think, it's hella cool.
Yeah. They were very intentional about
Yeah, I could
getting
tell.
that acronym.
It sounds like between working with veterans, musicians, and how much information you've learned and some of the tragedy of the suffering people have, that must take a big toll on you, having to hear people sad about their passion or their way of life, and now they have a problem. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
When I was first starting out, I think what a lot of people go through in grad school is trying to reckon having empathy for other people without being completely consumed by it, because that's a fast track to getting burnt out in your profession. And so, I started grad school 10 years ago. So I've been graduated for about 7 years. So I've been practicing for 7 years. And when someone is sitting across the table from me and they are being vulnerable with me about their feelings and the impact that's having on them, I feel those feelings. And it can be upsetting. But what's been wonderful is the longer I practice and the more I help people and the more I grow the breadth and depth of my skills and my experience, on top of the sadness and empathy for another person, is this fuel that we can help. We can do something. And I just feel really motivated to help not only this person that I'm sitting with, but the next person who walks through the door and the 10 concert goers who have the misfortune of standing next to me at a gig because I'm going to talk to them about hearing protection. We'll talk about fun stuff first, but eventually it's going to come up.
You can't help yourself.
I can't help myself. And with the Sensaphonics teal case, you open it up, the
Mine's pretty
the
dirty.
silver. Yeah, we can get you a new one.
It's so dirty.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I can't believe I put these things in my ear still. They still work.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, no, I just, and obviously, working with the music industry as my primary patient base, I have a good time. Like these are great people. I'm at least once a week, if not every day, just struck by how lucky I feel to work with this patient population, professionally and personally. So most days I just feel, even if there's a couple hard cases, I just feel really excited to try to do some good and have a little fun along the way.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you can't take it too personally, and you know that you might be hearing sad information, but you're doing good work and you're helping people. You're only hearing sad stuff because you're helping people, so
Yeah.
things are going to come out along the way.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what I now we're thinking about sadness, but I'll tell you what made me, in my practice, the thing that's made me the most sad is having to ask elderly people to pay to hear, to pay for hearing aids. It's a big problem. And because we've talked about it, about the state of American healthcare, it's a for-profit system, and no one becomes an audiologist to sell a 92-year-old grandma $6,000 worth of hearing aids. That's what makes me feel sad. That's hard. That's a tough pill to swallow. And it's the system in which we live currently, unfortunately.
What would be how would you fix that? Just revamp the system, how they get their funding, where they put it?
Yeah. Honestly, universal healthcare, single payer system. You can cut this if you want to, but
No, I don't cut anything.
we're the richest country in the history of human existence.
Yeah.
The wealth we have in this country, if we chose to allocate it accordingly, every single person in this country could have proper health care.
Absolutely.
And it would be cheaper to provide per person than the current system. We pay more than any other industrialized country for health care, and the quality of the health care that we get is horrible.
It is.
Yeah, it's a big disservice, especially, if we want to talk money, if we want to sell the concept of universal health care, not only is it cheaper per person compared to our current system, you have to look at how much it's going to cost us as a society for people to live with untreated hearing loss. For all of the comorbidities we've already discussed, when you have hearing loss, your fall risk increases. Part of your balance and your sense of where you are in space comes from hearing. You're listening to your feet on the floor. You're listening to someone go, "Hey, watch out. Watch out." And you're alert and you're aware of your environments. So people who have untreated hearing loss, their risk for falls increases. And we know that as you move through life, to have a fall is devastating, especially above a certain age. And that exact age is not popping into my head right now. But
probably above 80,
above a certain age,
70, 80. I can see it being pretty rough.
it increases your mortality risk to have a fall at a certain point. That's expensive. Dementia's expensive. Depression's expensive. There's all of these, ripple effects of hearing loss that are very expensive, more expensive per person than paying for a pair of hearing aids. So from an economical standpoint, it would save us money if people could have hearing aids.
Yeah, I know. I don't know why the system is the way it is. I mean, it's always money. Whenever you don't know why, it's money.
Yeah, just follow the money.
But there could be a lot of money made from a healthier society. It's just going to be made in a different place, from a different avenue.
That's exactly right.
You just got to move it. It's there. The money's not going anywhere. You just got to move it around in different places.
Yeah.
It is sad to know that it almost feels on purpose sometimes. The healthcare system, the fact that people will have hearing damage, eye damage, oral issues with their teeth, just things that are not that much work, and can save a lot of money down the road. And you're just kicking the can down the road with these problems.
Exactly. And the phrase, you gotta spend money to make money. In this case, it's you've got to spend money to save money. And it's true.
It's so true. Well, I don't know what to do about it. I mean, you get enough professionals and doctors to say something. Usually you need someone who's got a lot of power to say something.
You need someone with a lot of power, and you need someone with a lot of money. We need people to lobby the healthcare industry.
So you better go to D.C. What are you waiting for?
I'm ready.
Yeah? I'll vote for you.
Thank you. If I had, sometimes I think about this, if I had the capacity to live and be healthy for 500 years, like living and quality of life are different things, right? If I could be healthy and live 500 years, I would be a lobbyist for healthcare.
For
actual people, for audiology, for actual people.
Why not do it now? You're young.
Because there's only 12 music audiologists in America.
That's true. I hope if you're listening to this and you could imagine yourself being an audiologist. You should try it. It's a noble pursuit. It's a beautiful job. Not enough people do it. I don't hear much about it out there in the world. I before Sensaphonics, I think the last time I went to I got a lot of hearing tests done when I was a kid because I had a really intense brain surgery. And I would go to University of Chicago all the time, and they would test me. The weirdest test. Put me in rooms with flashing lights and all these sounds. I was a
Yeah.
little kid. And then I didn't really go forever until I went to Sensaphonics. And that's it. I had no idea what I was doing. Thank God I didn't hurt my hearing. I should have. I've been in loud bands, rock music, concerts, a lot of power tools, did a lot of construction growing up, and I somehow didn't lose my hearing, but
Yeah.
got lucky.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
I'm glad.
Yeah, me too.
I'm glad.
It'd be so sad.
And that's the story for most people. They have some sort of screening in childhood and then nothing until something goes wrong.
Yeah, like a tetanus shot. Like, oh, it's been 10 years? Well, better get you another one.
Exactly.
Yeah, it should be more normalized in school. Yearly exams when you have to do this, and that. You should have to get. I think, is it too much to say people should get a full, like, why not get your hearing tested from the lowest to the highest frequency range that is audible for us? Why
Yeah.
stop it at 8K?
Because speech. Most audiologists are thinking speech, hearing aids. And all the speech frequencies, the fundamentals are
Yeah.
below
Yeah.
8.
But that extra octave, that's where the pizzazz is. It's
It
the life.
is. It's the spice.
What do you think's going on? I do this thing where I show my students like the high frequencies, and I'll do a filter, and you turn up and it gets really loud and it hurts. It gets really irritating. We're talking like 8K and above. When you say it's a drum kit or cymbals, it hurts so bad. But then I won't change the volume and I'll let the full range through, and it doesn't hurt anymore. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah, what's going on with that? Why is it that 8,000 hertz and above at, we'll say, 80 decibels really hurts?
Yeah.
Like it starts to be agitating and uncomfortable. Then I'll take the EQ filter and slide it down and let the full range of frequencies through the whole music. It's the same volume, and all of a sudden pain goes away. It's not irritating or uncomfortable anymore.
I don't know. Masking, perhaps. So there's some.
Masking.
Do you know about the upward spread of masking?
I think so. It's been a bit.
So when you stimulate the cochlea, the lower frequencies, there's about the traveling wave around the cochlea. When low frequencies will always mask high, which interferes with your perception to hear high frequencies. So that would be my guess.
Okay.
Is we're getting this upward spread of masking effect where it's changing their ability to hear those high frequencies,
Okay.
even though they're still there.
Okay. That makes sense. I was just wondering. That was more of a question I had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to add that to my research list. I have a number of topics. When you edit this, although it sounds like you're not.
I don't edit. I don't edit for two reasons. One, I love transparency in this day and age where people are just being themselves. We're not saying anything bad or crazy. And two, I don't have time for that.
I know. And I was like, do you think you can get this out by World Hearing Day? You were like, definitely. I was like, wow, he works really fast.
I mean, I still will
Upload.
do the audio and get the right EQ compression and stuff like that. And then we'll still put the video on it and do like a watermark. It still takes time.
Yeah.
But I leave it as the time we spoke to the time we end. For post-production, so it's easier. And two, so any listeners, they know I'm always this is what's happening.
Yeah.
It's not sugar-coated. We're not lying. We're not trying to lie. But I'm not deceiving anyone. I'm not like editing things out. And then I'm also
Definitely.
not trying to do like got you moments. And,
Definitely.
Like, trying to pull something out of you to go viral.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that could happen, but some people do that a little too much on the nose.
Yeah.
You know?
No, that's good to know. That's good to know because I don't have a ton of podcasting experience. I think this is my third, maybe my second and a half podcast.
Second and a half? There was a half of one?
Yeah. It's like a 15-minute,
Oh, okay. There's your first. Do you know how
Powwow.
long we've been talking for?
probably like 2 hours. Are you serious?
You have work tomorrow. You have people's lives to save.
Oh my
You have
gosh.
ears to heal.
Wow. That's called flow state.
Yeah.
Just been locked in.
Yeah. And every single person before they come on, they're like, I don't know if I can talk that long. Like, what do you want to talk to me? Like, about what? Like, how can we talk for that? I'm like, trust me. You actually did most of the talking. I probably spoke
Yeah,
15% of the time. No, I mean, that's the whole point of this kind of episode.
Yeah.
And yet, yeah, it wasn't hard at all. and you probably can keep going.
Yeah.
You know, we still even get to about, like what you do for fun and whatnot, but that's probably because you're working too much.
I have a good time. That'll be part 2.
Yeah, part
That'll be
2.
the encore episode.
Yeah, we'll have to
After the
have you
Quiet
come by.
Place rant goes
Oh,
viral.
yeah. I'm definitely use that
So-
as a cut. That'll be on TikTok.
I hope you
Oh,
do.
you can't watch it. You don't have TikTok anymore.
I'm just going to have to do it.
No, it'll
I
be on
forgot we already
YouTube.
talked about that. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I've been TikTok sober for about a month. Send me the link though. I'll watch it.
I'll send you all the links. It'll be
Good.
everywhere. It'll be all on all
Perfect.
streaming services. I'm tired. It's been a long day. I had a podcast earlier today I did with a musician from Nashville.
Oh wow.
And we did a video session and a podcast.
Yeah.
It's rare I do 2 in one day, but
That's a lot.
yeah, it's been a stimulating day.
Yeah.
Did that. Yeah.
you need
it's
your
been nice.
you need your listening break.
I know. I that's why I like sleeping, but now I've been worrying, is it weird to sleep with a fan? Because fans are kind of loud, and if it's on for 8 hours.
You can use your NIOSH app to measure. I really want it below 70.
Okay.
So there are some studies that show that white noise machines for infants as they sleep overnight can impact their auditory learning. So what I'm starting to recommend for people is to, put a 2-hour timer to put the baby down and have it auto shut off. I don't believe the same effect is present in adults. So as long as it's at a lower listening level, you should be okay.
Say 70.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's loud.
Yeah.
That's a loud
I don't need
white
to be
noise
too
machine.
loud. It's mostly
Yeah.
just the city's loud.
Exactly.
And I don't need to be loud. It just has to be loud enough to mask the car or if someone's, the brakes screeching or someone yelling on the street or a bottle being thrown, whatever
Exactly.
it is. That's all. I don't want to hear that.
Exactly.
Otherwise,
because
if I could,
your
I'd
lizard
sleep.
brain thinks it's a threat.
Exactly. I'm such a light sleeper. I would have been, we went back in time a million years. I would have been the guy that has to guard people at night
Yeah.
because I would just hear everything.
Yeah. Same. And I mean,
It's a-
part of it is I grew up in Vermont where there's no sound and no light at nighttime. And so I did a fan for years, and then I got my custom sleep plugs from Sensaphonics.
Custom sleep plugs.
We make custom sleep plugs.
Huh.
Yeah.
How does that work? I mean,
It's-
not like another. They're kind of like those.
Yeah,
Here.
so it's made out of a softer silicone compared to
okay.
the filtered plugs. But then because we don't have the filter inside of it, it's smaller, and then we can really scoop out the face plate so it's concave so you can side sleep and still be comfortable.
That makes sense.
The sleep plugs are
I
awesome.
need to look into that because I'm addicted to the fan because
Yeah.
I can't, any sound wakes me up and
Yeah.
it's so uncomfortable. I hate it. I don't want it to be that way.
Yeah.
Just my brain.
You could still have, you could wear the sleep plugs and have the fan on a little bit just to
Yeah.
still create, even out the sound environment too. Yeah.
There's got to be something to that, to why some people are more sensitive to sound while they're sleeping than others. I wonder what it is that does that. Because there's always that person in your life that
Yeah.
could sleep through anything,
Yes.
and you're like, how? Everything wakes me up.
Because they live a very privileged and charmed life. That's why.
We could end on that.
Absolutely.
All right. Shannon, thank you so much for coming in and sharing 3 hours of knowledge on the world. Very helpful. I learned a lot. I know listeners that definitely learned a lot. I hope that we can ignite people to talk more about this. You don't want to annoy anyone, but talk to your friends about it. Tell them about companies like Sensaphonics, earplugs, hearing wellness. There's plenty of great charts online where you can Google like time exposure and decibel, correlations, like how long should I listen to sound for. You can find a lot of those. Anything you'd like to plug or tell the listeners about, or did I just kind of cover it all?
I think you covered it all. World Hearing Day is
March 3rd.
today.
I thought it was March 3rd.
Well,
Oh,
you're going to air it on March 3rd.
it's today.
Celebrate World Hearing Day on March 3rd and give your ears some love. Get a filtered earplug, turn down your levels with headphones, and take some listening breaks. And get a baseline hearing test if you don't have one already. And check that baseline every couple of years to make sure your ears are staying free from sound injury. And you can see me at Sensaphonics if you want to, or you can see a number of other wonderful audiologists And I'll send you links if you want to attach it to the episode.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah.
I'll share all the links, everyone, in the description below. And yes, check out Sensaphonics or the other 11 audiologists in America. And watch The Sound of Metal. It's a great movie.
So good.
Yeah. Just keep your sound quiet when you watch it. No.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Thank you again for doing this.
Thank you so
Appreciate it.
much.
You're
This has been
welcome.
awesome. Thanks for
It's
having
been
me.
fun. Went by fast.
I know.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Ciao. All right.
We did it.
You did it.
Wow.